Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. You're not going to drift off with some charming royal anecdote or a tale of old invention. Nope. Tonight you wake up in medieval England, a place of foggy fields, wooden teeth and deeply questionable hygiene. You're about to test your luck, your stomach and your will to live. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I don't want pity clicks, I want fellow history nerds. And hey, drop your city and what time it is where you're watching from. I love seeing who's out there half asleep with me. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wake up coughing. The air is thick, smoky and smells like a wet dog wearing cabbage perfume. You're lying on a mat of straw that has something moving inside it, probably bugs. Your bed is tucked into the corner of a tiny cottage made entirely of timber, mud, and whatever the wind didn't blow away last week. Sunlight pokes through the wooden slats, and you can hear chickens clucking right outside your head. Because yes, the chickens sleep inside with you. So does the pig. She's got a name, something like Grumda, and she's eyeballing you like you might be breakfast. This is your home now. You're a peasant in a 13th century English village, somewhere near the edge of a muddy path that probably counts as a road. You sit up and immediately hit your head on a low ceiling beam. You've already got a bump. Great start. Your first sensation is cold, deep, joint-aching cold. There's a tiny fire in the centre of the room, but it's mostly smoke and crackle, doing nothing to warm you. The walls are coated in years of soot. There's no chimney. The smoke just drifts up into the thatch roof, slowly turning everything inside and everyone into smoked ham. You smell like burnt onion and damp wood. And honestly, you kind of always will. Next to you are a couple of other beds, really just hay piles where your family sleeps. Maybe it's your family. Hard to tell. Someone's snoring. One of the kids has fleas. One of the adults probably does too. It's fine. Fleas are like roommates. You don't love them, but you learn to coexist. Outside, a rooster screams into the morning like it's personally offended. You shuffle to the door, no knob, just a heavy wooden slab, and step out into the yard. You immediately sink ankle deep into mud. It's everywhere. Mud is the official texture of this time period. Mud in your socks, mud in your food, mud in your thoughts. You look around. The village is maybe 20 buildings total. All squat little homes like yours, surrounded by thin wooden fences trying and failing to keep livestock in their place. Sheep are wandering freely. A goat is chewing someone's laundry. Someone else is relieving themselves into a ditch. You make eye contact. No one cares. The air stinks of manure and wood smoke. In the distance you can see the grey outline of the manor house, home of the local lord who technically owns this entire place, including you. It's not slavery exactly, but let's just say your freedom is symbolic. There's a well in the centre of the village, and a few people are already there, hauling water in wooden buckets. You're going to want some of that, but also don't drink too fast or raw, that's how you get typhoid, or cholera, or an early grave. So again, go easy on the well water. Someone yells something in Middle English. You don't understand it at first, but you realise that they're shouting at you to get your lazy self moving. You're already behind on your chores, which is wild because you woke up 5 minutes ago and you're covered in dirt. It's your job to tend the fields today, which sounds pastoral, sure, but mostly involves backbreaking labour and digging out rocks with your bare hands. Tools are scarce and half of them are broken. Gloves? Never heard of them. You look down at your hands. They're already blistered. You've aged 5 years in 10 minutes. You also haven't eaten yet, but you're not alone there. Hunger is a permanent condition here, not a temporary one. Food security is a concept for the future. For now, you subsist on a diet of whatever didn't rot last week. Dried peas, turnips, maybe some porridge if you can boil water without burning down your hut. Meat? Ha! Maybe once a month. Eggs, only if the chickens are feeling generous. You pass a few neighbours. Everyone's missing teeth. Everyone smells like a barn. One woman nods to you and spits into the mud with a sound so violent it startles a duck. You wave, because politeness never dies. A kid runs past barefoot, holding a stick like a sword. He's got a thick smear of something suspicious on his face, but he's smiling like he owns the place. You envy him for a second before remembering that most children here die before their 5th birthday. Reality check. You keep walking. The landscape around you is mostly flat. Fields upon fields, broken only by low stone walls and hedgerows. You hear distant bells ringing from the parish church, calling people to morning prayers. It's the only stone building in sight, which makes it the safest in a storm, or an invasion, or a peasant revolt. A wind picks up, rustling the leaves, and you get a brief moment of peace. The sky is overcast, which is normal, and the horizon is a soft, misty blur. It's strangely beautiful if you squint past the outhouse and that one guy vomiting into a ditch, and as you take a deep breath, accepting your new life in this grimy, smelly, and deeply inconvenient century, one final thought creeps in. You're going to have to do this all again tomorrow, and the next day, and the one after that. Welcome to medieval England. You start your morning quest with one simple goal: find something to eat. Seems easy enough, right? Wrong. Welcome to the peasant breakfast buffet, where your options range from disappointing to mildly tragic. You step back inside the cottage, where someone has managed to coax the fire into a pitiful flame. It's hot enough to singe your eyebrows if you lean in too close, but not hot enough to actually cook anything. Still, it's what you've got. In the corner there's a small cloth sack filled with yesterday's barley mash. It smells sour and looks like something scooped from the bottom of a horse's hoof, but it's technically food. You scrape a few lumps into a wooden bowl and squint at the texture. It's gritty, a little slimy, and you're not entirely sure it's supposed to be grey. Doesn't matter. This is breakfast, but you're feeling bold. Adventurous. Maybe, just maybe, you'll spice things up, so you reach for the pitcher of ale. That's right, breakfast beer. Everyone drinks it. Kids too. It's weak, more like beer-flavoured water, but it's safer than anything that comes from a stream. You take a cautious sip and immediately wince. It's warm, flat, slightly vinegary, but hey, your stomach isn't cramping yet, so you keep drinking. Your stomach grumbles. Not from hunger exactly, more from confusion. You're giving it things it hasn't seen before, like mashed oats mixed with a last night's dirt and a splash of peasant brew. Delicious. Across the room, someone else is gnawing on a piece of bread so hard it sounds like a blacksmith at work. You watch their teeth struggle against it and realise the bread might be older than you. You briefly wonder about eggs. The chickens are right outside after all. You step out hoping to find one doing its thing, but you're met only with suspicious stares and flapping wings. You spot an egg, cracked, half frozen, already claimed by a fat rat. Breakfast sabotage. A goat bleats at you. You stare at it, silently asking, "Would you let me milk you?" It blinks, then headbutts you in the shin. That's a no. You shuffle back to the fire with your half-finished barley goop and ale. You sit on a three-legged stool that wobbles like it's about to commit suicide. Across from you, a grandmother figure coughs directly into her shawl and mutters something about the devil. Or maybe it's a blessing, hard to tell. She then starts praying, eyes closed, lips moving fast. You don't interrupt. As you finish your meal, the cottage door opens and a young boy runs in shouting something about bread fines. You barely make out the words, but the gist is clear. Somebody didn't bake enough loaves for the communal oven. That's right, not everyone has their own fire. In most villages, there's a shared oven managed by someone terrifying. You get fined if you try to bake bread in your own hearth instead. Not for safety reasons, for taxation. The church and the Lord want their cut of your flour. You now realise even cooking is a legal matter. Almost everything is. Want to grind your own grain? Use the Lord's mill. Want to bake your bread? Pay a fee. Want to brew your ale? Same deal. You're surrounded by invisible toll booths, all demanding coins you absolutely do not have. You're starting to feel the claustrophobia of it all, how every basic survival task is tangled in rules and dues. You look at your bowl of sadness. You were hoping for a hearty meal, but instead you're eating what is essentially medieval paste, sipping lukewarm beer like it's a consolation prize. You notice something moving on the wall and lean closer. It's a large beetle, possibly edible. You're not that desperate. Yet. Suddenly there's shouting outside. Curious, you step into the muddy yard again, bowl in hand, and join a cluster of villagers gathering near the well. Turns out someone found a dead eel in one of the water buckets. A gift from the river gods? A sign of doom? Both, probably. A lively debate starts. One old man swears it's good luck. A teenage girl insists it means someone in the village will die soon. The eel becomes the focus of an impromptu sermon by a wandering friar, who claims the eel is God's metaphor for gluttony. You sip your beer and back away slowly. With breakfast more or less finished and spiritual confusion now added to your day, you wander toward the edge of the village. You pass a row of drying fish hanging from a rope. They've clearly been dead for days and smell like sin, but someone will eat them. Maybe you. At the edge of the fields, you spot a cart stuck in the mud. A man is swearing at it, waving a stick and trying to convince his ox to move. The ox, perfectly still, looks at him like it's deeply over this century. You relate. A voice calls out your name, or at least your assigned peasant equivalent. It's your reeve, the guy in charge of making sure you and everyone else work hard enough not to get whipped or fined. He points to a stack of firewood. You nod. Task accepted. You trudge over, bowl still in hand, and begin hauling logs. Breakfast time is officially over. As you lift your third log, your back cracks in a way that makes you question everything. You're already exhausted, you're still hungry, and your face is now covered in soot from a passing cart and mass. A goose honks at you aggressively. The day has begun in earnest. And here's the kicker. No lunch break, not really. Maybe you'll find some onion tops or a handful of berries later. But meals are more like episodes of not being starving. Dinner might be better, assuming someone traps a rabbit or a neighbour's hen accidentally dies. Don't get your hopes up. By now, the sun is crawling slowly across the grey sky, promising nothing but more work and maybe, if you're lucky, slightly warmer beer tonight. And as you toss another log into the stack, the thought sneaks in. How is anyone still alive here? How did they survive on this? The truth is, most didn't. Malnutrition was the default setting. Stunted growth, tooth decay and scurvy were all just Tuesday. Even the nobility had worms. And you're just trying to make it to nightfall without passing out or accidentally offending a saint. So was breakfast successful? You ate something, you drank something. You didn't vomit or cry yet. In this time period, that's basically a 5-star experience. The day stretches out in front of you like an open wound. Raw, endless, and in desperate need of stitches. After your culinary adventure of barley sludge and warm ale, you're immediately thrown into the soul-crushing rhythm of peasant life. Welcome to the grind, where labour isn't just a thing you do, it's the definition of your existence. You're directed toward the open field beyond the village, where a handful of other villagers are already bent over like croissants, hacking at the soil with crude tools. The field's called the common, which sounds cosy until you realise it refers to the fact that everybody's using it, fighting over it, and somehow still starving. The tool in your hand is technically a hoe, but it feels more like a sharpened stick tied to a rock. You start digging furrows into the dirt, which is clumpy, wet, and filled with rocks that seem personally offended by your presence. Your hands blister fast. The wind whips at your face. There's a steady drizzle, not enough to justify stopping, but just enough to soak through your one slightly mouldy tunic. And yes, let's talk about that tunic. It itches. It smells like wet dog and sour butter. It's made of coarse wool that has never once known the concept of comfort. Your underclothes, if you're lucky, they're linen. If not, you're going commandoed like half the village. Either way, everything chafes. Everything. As you bend to your work, your back starts to ache. There's no ergonomic anything, just the dull, steady misery of medieval agriculture. And the soil? It's bad. It's been overworked, under-fertilised and stomped on by enough livestock to have a permanent grudge against humanity. You'd kill for a tractor. You'd kill for a shovel that didn't wobble when you touched it. Across the field, a pair of kids are throwing clumps of dirt at each other. They're barefoot, laughing, and covered in grime from head to toe. One of them pulls something from the ground. An old coin? A bone? It's hard to tell, and screams with joy. You smile, and then promptly trip over a tree root and land face first in a cold puddle. As you sit up, coughing up mud and dignity, a group of older villagers walks by, hauling bundles of manure. Real, steaming manure. For spreading on the crops, of course. The scent hits you like a spiritual attack. It's pungent, earthy, and somehow sweet in the worst way. One of the bundles drips onto your boot. You stare at it, sigh, and keep digging. By midday, though the sun is more of a suggestion than a light source, you're sore, hungry again, and entirely disillusioned. A man with a mangled ear offers you a strip of dried turnip as a snack. You chew it slowly. It tastes like a pencil, but it's something. The reeve shows up again to bark orders. This time you're instructed to assist with muck spreading. That's not a metaphor. It's exactly what it sounds like. You follow a cart loaded with manure, grabbing clumps with a wooden spade and flinging them in wide arcs across the field. Every splash sends a bit of it back into the air, into your eyes, into your soul. And here's a fun fact. The average medieval peasant consumed over 4,000 calories a day. Not because they were living the high life, but because this kind of work burned through your body like a furnace. You sweat, freeze, lift, haul, bend, drag, pull and squat until your knees beg for mercy. There are no breaks, no benches, no self-care. As you work, you overhear a conversation about someone in the next village over being fined for skipping a day in the fields. His punishment? Extra labour and a public flogging. You swallow hard. Suddenly your aching arms don't seem so bad. You can't afford disobedience. You can barely afford to exist. Occasionally a priest walks by offering blessings and disapproving glances. You're supposed to thank God for your lot in life. After all, you could have been born a leper. Or French. And speaking of God, your entire workday is framed by religious expectations. No working on Sunday, prayers at sunrise, feast days scattered through the calendar, each one more confusing than the last. Today is apparently the feast of St. Mildred. You have no idea what she did, but someone left her a cabbage on the chapel doorstep. By late afternoon, your fingers are numb. The muck is under your nails, in your ears, and on your tongue. You gag a little. A crow lands nearby and eyes you like it's planning your funeral. But amid all this ill fear and fatigue, something strangely beautiful happens. The clouds shift. A beam of sunlight breaks through and casts a golden hue over the field. Dust glitters in the air. The wind dies down. For a moment, the world feels almost gentle. Then someone behind you sneezes with enough force to rattle the livestock and you're dragged back into reality. As the sun begins to dip low, signalling the end of another grueling day, you drag your aching body back toward the village. Your tunic is stiff with dried mud, your back throbs, your feet are a horror story, and you're still hungry. Back in the village, the evening routine begins. Fires are lit, chickens are wrangled, someone is shouting about a missing goose again. You collapse onto a stool near the hearth. A woman offers you a chunk of cheese. It's hard enough to chip a tooth, but you accept it like it's gold. You stare into the flames and try not to think about tomorrow, because tomorrow is exactly the same. And the next day, and the next. This is life for the average peasant. Ceaseless work, aching joints, and the constant fear of famine, illness, or tax collectors. And yet somehow people managed. They laughed. They fell in love. They sang weird songs about turnips. You've survived your first full work day. Barely. Welcome to the grind. Only 12,000 more to go. The sun barely disappears behind the trees before another voice rings out across the village. A sharp, urgent call to gather. You've barely had time to peel the dried manure off your sleeves when a neighbour grabs your arm and points toward the manor house. "He's coming," she whispers. You don't need to ask who, you already know. The lord, your lord, the man who technically owns the land, the livestock, the village, and, if we are being brutally honest, a large portion of your current autonomy. You haul yourself to your feet with a groan and follow the slow migration of villagers toward the clearing near the church, where the Lord likes to make his grand appearances. You've never actually spoken to him, but you've heard plenty of stories. He's either a cruel tyrant who finds people for looking at him sideways, or a drunken idiot who once tried to joust a windmill. Possibly both. When you arrive, the scene is half circus, half courtroom. Villagers gather in a loose, nervous semicircle, all facing the arriving procession. A few mounted men in dusty armour, followed by a wagon full of sacks and scrolls, and finally the man himself, draped in what must be his casual power outfit, a fur-lined cloak, a tunic brighter than the rest of the colourless village, and boots clean enough to suggest he's never walked anywhere that didn't already smell like rosewater. He looks down from his horse with an expression that says, "I don't know your names, but I own your destinies." A steward, gaunt, grim, and suspiciously rodent-like, steps forward and unrolls a piece of parchment. The crowd collectively tenses. Announcements are never good. No one gets summoned for a surprise birthday party here. His lordship would like to remind all tenants that tax day is this Friday, before sundown. All dues to be paid in full, 12 eggs, 1 bushel of barley, and 6 days of labour per family. He pauses and looks over the top of the scroll. No exceptions. There's a low murmur through the crowd. You glance around. Most people look like they haven't seen 12 eggs in a year, let alone in one basket. Barley? Maybe if the field stops hating you for a day. And 6 days of labour. You're already working 12 out of 7, but it gets better. Additionally, the steward continues, the reeve reports that 2 families have fallen behind in their grain tithe. His lordship is considering punitive measures. Now everyone's sweating. Punitive measures range from fines to flogging to having your front door taken away. You shift uncomfortably, suddenly aware that you might have missed a basket or two last month. Not on purpose. Just because there wasn't enough grain to go around. You were busy, there was frost, and a goat ate your ledger. The Lord finally speaks, his voice smoother than it should be. I do hope, he says, smiling faintly, that you all understand the importance of duty. A village is like a clock, yes? Each of you a cog. And I, he taps his chest, am the keeper of the time. You don't know what that means exactly, but it sounds like something rich people say before doing something incredibly unjust. After a few more vague threats and unnecessary declarations of his own importance, the Lord signals to his steward and turns his horse around. His guards follow, and the entire procession begins to retreat toward the manor. But before leaving, the steward tosses a sealed parchment to the ground. These are the updated duties. Reeve will post them. Then they're gone. The silence afterward is thick. A few people shuffle forward to examine the list. Others start muttering. You catch pieces of conversation. Complaints about how unfair the egg quota is. Theories about whether the Lord even knows what barley looks like. One whispered plan about hiding chickens in the woods. Desperate times, etc. You walk back toward your cottage with a heavy pit in your stomach. You don't have enough to meet the dues. No one does. It's not about actual resources. It's about control. These taxes exist to keep you down, not to keep the economy running. You're part of a system that bleeds you just enough to keep you alive and just weak enough to keep you obedient. Back at your hovel, someone has lit a new fire. The smoke crawls along the ceiling. You duck your head and sit by the flame, staring at the dancing light as the evening deepens into a cold, silent darkness. The little food you had for the day is gone. Your body aches from labour. And now there's the looming dread of Dues Day. You start mentally calculating. You've got 3 chickens, maybe 4 eggs if they all feel generous. You have some barley, but not enough for a full bushel. And as for 6 days of labour, you're already giving 10. You'll have to give more. Or someone else will give less and you'll pay for it. Your thoughts are interrupted by a knock on the wooden plank you call a door. It creaks open and the Reeves silhouette appears in the smoke. Just checking the head count, he says flatly. You've got 3 in this house, right? You nod slowly. Yes, 3. Good. Make sure your eggs are fresh. Lord doesn't like spots. Then he's gone. The room is quiet again. One of the kids coughs in the corner. A chicken shuffles closer to the fire. You stare at the flames until your eyes blur. You realise something unpleasant. Your time is not your own. Your sweat, your food, your hours, they all belong to a man who thinks of you as a walking egg delivery service. And yet here's the twist. This system is considered normal. Most people around you don't dream of escaping it. They don't imagine rebellion. They don't fantasize about freedom. They just endure, day by day, egg by egg. Of course, not everyone agrees. Somewhere out there, ideas are beginning to stir, serfs talking back, whispering about fairness, justice, even revolution. But that's not tonight's problem. Tonight's problem is finding 6 eggs and a miracle. So you lie down on your hay mattress again, pull a scratchy wool blanket over your head, and try not to dream of the manor's kitchen. Warm, clean, filled with meats you'll never taste. Maybe tomorrow you'll find a way to come up with those eggs, or maybe you'll join the chicken in the woods. You wake the next morning with a sneeze that nearly throws your back out. The inside of the cottage is cold, damp, and full of the kind of early morning silence that usually means bad news, or someone has already stolen your shoes. You sit up, sniff once, and realise something truly horrifying. You're expected at church today, not just because it's Sunday, which of course it is, but because the local priest has been on a sermon spree lately. Something about sin taking root in the village, or maybe sin sprouting from the well. It's unclear, he's very into metaphors. You throw on your one good tunic, which is really just your least offensive sack of wool, and splash some water on your face. It's ice cold and probably full of invisible microbes with revenge in their hearts, but it wakes you up. Someone hands you a crust of bread on the way out. It's so hard you could use it to break a window, but you gnaw at it anyway. The church stands at the edge of the village like a stone mother, judging everything around it. It's small, but to you it looks enormous. Tall, grey, and built to last longer than anything else in town, including your lifespan. The bell rings once, low and heavy. You join the slow, grim shuffle of villagers entering the nave, hats in hand, expressions somewhere between reverence and mild panic. Inside it's cold, though. It's always cold. The stone walls hold onto the chill like a grudge. There are no pews for the poor. You stand shoulder to shoulder, with 50 other souls staring ahead at a wooden altar decorated with a slightly off-brand depiction of Jesus that makes him look oddly smug. The priest stands nearby, arms raised, robes slightly frayed, eyes gleaming with the fiery joy of someone who gets to talk uninterrupted for an hour. He begins in Latin, which you don't understand. No one does, really. You know the rhythm, though. The cadence is like background music to your entire life. Latin first, English second, followed by a long speech where someone definitely gets accused of something they may or may not have done. You glance around the room and see heads bowed, eyes closed, lips moving. Not out of faith necessarily, but because muscle memory is a powerful thing. Eventually, the priest switches to English, or something close enough, and launches into today's sermon, which is about temptation. A favourite topic. You hear a familiar rant about ale, gambling, idle hands, and lustful behaviour, which, judging by the way he glances at the back row, probably means someone's been caught doing something behind the barn again. You're still only halfway listening when the priest suddenly pauses, raises a hand and says something that catches your attention. The eyes of the Lord are always watching, and so are mine. You flinch. Everyone does. It's the kind of sentence that makes you reflexively examine your last week for sins, even if all you did was eat someone else's onion. After the sermon, there's the collection. The tithe, 10% of your already non-existent income. It's not just expected, it's enforced. You either pay in coin, food, or labour. No one cares if you're struggling. If you can't give money, you can give time. If you can't give time, maybe you can spare your only candle. Something. Anything. You drop a few withered herbs into the basket and hope they look valuable. As you file out, the priest stands by the door, nodding and muttering blessings. His breath smells like old onions and holy wine. When it's your turn, he grips your shoulder and says, "Stay on the narrow path." You nod solemnly, and resist the urge to ask you if he knows where that path actually is, because all you've seen lately is mud. Outside, a small group gathers near the chapel wall, where the sin board hangs. It's not official, but everyone treats it like gospel. Scratched names, rumours, debts, and moral infractions, all anonymously posted by villagers who love gossip as much as they fear God. You see someone's accused of hoarding grain. Someone else allegedly danced during Lent. Scandalous stuff. You skim quickly and thank the heavens your name isn't up there. Yet. As the crowd disperses, you spot a few members of the village elite chatting in their slightly cleaner clothes. One of them is the bailiff's son. He's got boots with real buckles. You try not to stare, but they glint in the sun like tiny golden lies. You walk back toward your hovel, reflecting on the strange fusion of faith and fear that governs everything here. Church isn't just a place to pray, it's the surveillance system, it's the moral compass, it's the social media feed. If the Lord of the Manor controls your body whole, the church controls your soul, and both are competing to see who can make you feel more guilty for existing. And here's a strange historical twist. Even though the church holds enormous power, some of its own clergy don't fully buy in. You've overheard rumours, whispers about monks who doubt the papacy, who secretly read Greek texts, who question the tithes. But publicly, everyone nods, bows and pays. Doubt is dangerous. It's easier to just keep walking the line. By the time you're home, you're starving again. You spot your neighbour boiling something that might be a turnip or might be a rock. Smells decent though. The kids are chasing a chicken with wild determination. A few villagers are already picking up tools for more fieldwork. The Sabbath might be holy, but it doesn't pay the bills. Especially when the Lord's quota is due in 5 days. As the sky shifts into greyish afternoon, you try to steal a few moments of rest. You sit beside the fire, sip the last of your watered-down ale, and stare at the wall. There's a small wooden carving nailed to the beam above the hearth. A crude depiction of St. Cuthbert. He's holding a fish and looks mildly annoyed. You pray to him anyway, can't hurt. You say something like, "Help me find more eggs," and "Please don't let me be the next name on the sin board." You close your eyes, you rest your head. You try not to think about the eternal dance between salvation and starvation, but deep down you know one thing for certain. The church isn't just watching over you, it's watching through you, into every crack bowl, every unpaid tithe, every whispered joke about the priest's lazy eye. It sees, it remembers, it punishes, And if you're lucky, it might just forgive you for that one time you swore at the goat. There's something deeply ironic about needing water to survive when most of it around you wants you dead. After your Sunday brush with salvation, you wake the next morning with a throat so dry it feels like you swallowed a handful of old straw, your lips are cracked, your breath tastes like wood smoke and regret, and your first coherent thought is simple: I need a drink. Unfortunately, in medieval England, this is a high-stakes gamble. Sort of like drinking from a puddle and praying it doesn't give you a disease with the word bloody in its name. You step outside into another grey, damp morning. The ground is sticky underfoot, the clouds low and colourless, and the chickens are in full chaotic mode, pecking each other over some invisible feud. You grab a small clay cup, if you're lucky this one hasn't been peed in by a cat, and head toward the village well. It's located in the centre of the commons, a wooden structure leaning just enough to look ominous, but not enough for anyone to fix it. There's already a small crowd gathered, everyone waiting their turn to fill up buckets, flasks, and the occasional pot that doubles as a helmet on the feast days. You take your place in line, listening to the hum of conversation around you. Most of it's about someone's sheep getting stolen, again, a baby with mysterious boils, not great, and a travelling peddler who supposedly sold a magical rat trap that failed spectacularly. No one seems particularly surprised. When it's finally your turn, you lower the rope slowly, the bucket squealing with the kind of noise that suggests it might unravel completely at any second. It hits the water with a satisfying splash and you pull it back up, arms shaking with effort. When you peer inside, the water looks okay. Not good, but not horrifying either. There's a slight greenish tint, and something tiny swims just under the surface. You scoop a cupful, sniff it, and take a tentative sip. It's cold and tastes faintly of moss and whatever emotion follows betrayal. Still, you've had worse. The truth is, water is dangerous. Clean sources are few and far between, and the idea of filtration is still a few centuries away. Most people drink what they can find, rivers, streams, rain barrels, but these are also shared by livestock, wild animals, and that one guy who definitely relieves himself wherever he wants. The well is the safest option, and even it comes with risks. Last summer someone threw a dead badger in it by accident, and everyone got stomach cramps for weeks. You start walking back toward your hut when you hear a familiar sound behind you. Retching. You turn and see a young boy doubled over near the edge of the green, vomiting into the mud. One rushes to help. It's not apathy, it's just routine. You wait, watching carefully. If he starts showing spots or stops speaking, it's probably dysentery or typhoid. Or something even worse. Someone makes the sign of the cross. You do the same, just in case. As you head back, you pass the village stream. It's a slow, winding little thing. And on sunny days, rare as they are, children sometimes wade in it, laughing and splashing, like they don't know it's basically a liquid grave. Today, though, it smells wrong. You stop and glance down the bank where a sheep carcass is lodged between some rocks, bobbing gently like a terrible little boat. So, yeah, not drinking from that anytime soon. This is where ale comes in. Weak beer isn't just a treat, it's survival. Fermentation kills off most of the deadly stuff, and people drink it constantly. You're expected to brew your own or buy it from someone who does. Today, that someone is a hunched old man named Wirt, who brews his ale behind a leaning shack that's part home, part yeast graveyard. You make your way to him and trade a couple of onions for a small flask. He pours it with a wink and says, "This one won't blind you, probably." You laugh nervously and take a sip. It's sour, thick, and smells like old socks, but it's safe-ish. You tuck it away. You'll need it later when the thirst creeps in again. Here's the ironic thing. You're surrounded by water in some form almost all the time. Rivers, rain, puddles, snow, but almost none of it is safe to drink. And everyone knows it. That's why you boil what you can. That's why you drink ale and weak wine and even vinegar water. Anything to avoid the stomach monsters. Even the nobility isn't immune. Sure, they have silver cups and imported spices to make their drinks smell better, but they're still filling their goblets from the same diseased rivers, just upstream. Royalty gets diarrhea too. They just have servants to blame. You remember a story the priest told once? About a king who drank only rainwater collected from church rooftops because he thought it was holier. He died of bladder fever, which is the kind of thing that sounds made up until you realise it was just another way of saying his insides rotted out one sip at a time. But here's a weirder twist. Some people prefer not to drink water at all. There are fringe beliefs that plain water is unhealthy, that it makes your blood cold or weakens your humours. Some people bathe in it, rarely, but refuse to let it near their mouths. So while you're just trying not to die from a cup of moss juice, someone else is claiming ale is the divine path to inner balance. Even the church has opinions. Water is symbolic, cleansing, holy, and baptismal. But that doesn't mean the priest is chugging from the well. He's got his own stash of mead and a suspiciously nice wine flask. You've seen him sipping it during Vespers when he thinks no one's looking. Back home, you set your cup down carefully, away from the fire where no animals can knock it over or do something unholy to it. You think about tomorrow, more chores, more ale, more staring at water like it's both salvation and silent killer. Your body aches from dehydration in ways you didn't know were possible. Your mouth tastes like soot and barley. You think of the dead sheep in the stream and suppress a gag. And here's the truly wild part. This isn't a crisis. It's just life. Everyone is chronically thirsty, mildly ill, and one gulp away from disaster. But no one panics, because panic takes energy, and energy requires hydration. And hydration is currently fermenting in Wirt's shed. You lie down that night with your flask tucked close, like a child might cling to a toy. You're not afraid of the dark or the rats or the weird noise the goat made earlier. You're afraid of drinking the wrong thing and waking up with your insides trying to escape your body. So you whisper a small prayer, not to St. Cuthbert this time, but to anyone listening. Please let the water not kill me this week. It's a low bar, but here in medieval England, that's called optimism. You've had a full day of labour, church, and drinking suspiciously cloudy liquids, so naturally, the next thing on your calendar is a journey to town. It's market day. The sun has barely risen and you're already awake, stomach growling, shoulders as taut, and brain whispering. Don't go, just don't. But you have no choice, your household is low on salt, completely out of thread, and someone desperately needs a new cooking pot after the last one cracked in half when the fire got too enthusiastic. So you bundle up in your best walking rags, grab your sack of trade goods, 2 eggs, a wedge of questionable cheese, and some dried herbs you're not entirely sure are legal, and start the trek. It's 5 miles to the nearest market town, over muddy paths, through bramble-choked woods, and past at least one place where bandits have definitely murdered someone. You try not to think about it. The road is alive with people. Other villagers with sacks of onions, a shepherd driving a flock that seems actively suicidal, a travelling tinker whose cart is missing a wheel, and whose song is stuck on an eternal loop about a magical rooster. Everyone's headed the same way. Safety in numbers, maybe, or just mutual misery. By the time you reach the town's outskirts, your feet are soaked, your back is aching, and you've been overtaken by a nun riding a donkey that looked deeply ashamed of its life choices. Still, there it is, the town gate, stone walls rising from the earth like some divine middle finger. The gate itself is guarded by 2 men in dull chainmail who look bored and vaguely constipated. They don't even glance at you, but you still avoid eye contact, just in case someone decides today's the day to enforce a random toll. Inside, the town is chaos. Smells hit you first, a mixture of fresh bread, horse manure, spices, bitter. It's the kind of human odor that can only be described as emotional. There are stalls lining the narrow streets, each one manned by someone shouting their lungs out about how their onions are definitely not rotten or how their cloth was totally woven by monks in France. Spoiler, it wasn't. You start weaving your way through the crowd, holding your sack tight to your chest. Pickpockets are a real problem here. Small children with suspiciously clean hands keep bumping into people. And somewhere, you're pretty sure someone just lost a shoe, or a finger. Your first stop is the salt cellar. A squat man with a nose like a turnip and a voice like a crow. He eyes your eggs with disdain but agrees to give you a small pouch of salt in exchange. You thank him and back away slowly, because the last time someone questioned his prices, he bit them, literally. Next you look for thread. There's a woman selling bits of fabric, spools of coarse linen thread, and what might be sheep teeth disguised as beads. She gives you a look that says, "I don't trust you," and you return one that says, "Fair." Still, you manage to trade the cheese wedge for a bundle of thread, though you notice she sniffs it 3 times before agreeing. Feeling emboldened by your success, you start browsing. Market day isn't just about trade, it's also about news, gossip and entertainment. You pass a juggler in the square balancing 3 apples and a boot. A man on stilts calls out blessings in a booming voice, though he's clearly drunk and nearly knocks over a fishmonger's stalls. Kids are gathered around a puppet show depicting St. George stabbing a dragon that suspiciously resembles a dog with scales glued on. The crowd cheers anyway. You overhear someone whispering about a local lord raising taxes, another talking about a nearby village getting hit with a mysterious sickness, and a third claiming they saw a witch in the woods with glowing eyes and a pet fox that spoke Latin. You decide that one might be an exaggeration. You're about to head back when something stops you. An odd little tent tucked between two buildings. No sign, no banner. Just a curtain and a small table outside with a jar labelled Miracle Cures. Curiosity gets the better of you. You approach, and a tall, rail-thin woman emerges, wrapped in sark and scarves, eyes dark and unreadable. Looking for healing, she asks, in a voice like dry leaves. Or perhaps protection? She gestures to a tray of herbs, bones, and something that might be a mummified lizard. You pretend to browse. She leans closer. The water's been wrong lately. Best carry a charm. For safety, you nod. Hand over a few dried herbs, and she gives you a pouch filled with something. Probably nonsense. But you tuck it into your shirt anyway. You've seen too many people fall sick for no reason, and if a pouch of twigs and bone dust keeps you safe, why not? On your way out of the town square, you stop at a bread stall. The loaves are overpriced and hard as bricks, but you manage to trade for one using your last bit of dried sage. The merchant grunts approval and throws in a tiny heel of crust as a bonus. You'll treasure it. By now the sky's starting to dim. You're exhausted, feet blistered, and you've got to walk 5 miles back before nightfall. Bandits tend to come out after dark, so do wolves. Also, according to one very dramatic boy in your village, there's a giant with 7 toes in the woods. But you suspect that's just his uncle with bad footwear. The journey back is quiet. Everyone's too tired to talk. The donkey nun passes you again, nodding like she knows something you don't. You arrive home just as the last light slips below the trees. Inside your cottage, you lay out your haul. Thread, salt, slightly haunted bread, and your new miracle pouch. Not bad, not amazing. But in this world, even surviving market day without losing your money, dignity, or spleen is a win. As you lie down to sleep, you think about the city. How alive it is. How dangerous. How tempting. You understand why some people leave their villages behind, chasing the illusion of freedom in the city walls. But you also understand how many of them never come back. Market day isn't just a chance to trade goods. It's a mirror. You see what you don't have. You see what you'll never be, and you go home holding tight to whatever you manage to grasp. You wake up scratching, not a polite little itch behind the ear. This is a full-body, frantic clawing like your skin has decided it no longer wants you living inside it. You throw off your blanket and peer down at your arms in the dim morning light. Red bumps everywhere. Your body looks like it lost a battle with a swarm of angry mosquitoes, but you know better. This isn't mosquitoes. This is medieval England's version of an alarm clock. Lice. The entire village has them. No one talks about it like it's a problem. It's more like weather. Sometimes bad, sometimes worse, never avoidable. You start picking them out of your tunic seams with the kind of calm, dead-eyed acceptance usually reserved for people shelling peas or witnessing minor crimes. One of the kids nearby is also scratching, a good sign in that misery loves company sort of way. But the bumps are worse today, spreading down your chest and up your neck behind your ears. You start wondering if it's something else. Fleas, mites, bubonic plague? No, too early in the timeline. Hopefully. Either way, you need help. And this is how you find yourself heading toward the edge of the woods, to the house of the wise woman. Now every village has one. Part healer, part herbalist, part gossip repository. In yours, it's a woman named Elswith, who lives in a crooked cottage beneath an ash tree with a yard full of rusting charms, bones, and skulls that may or may not be decorative. Some folks call her a miracle worker. Others call her a witch. The truth? She's both, depending on who you ask and whether or not she fixed your gout. You push open her gate and step onto a path of crushed herbs that smell surprisingly pleasant. The door creaks open before you knock. She's already waiting. "Let me guess," she says, eyeing your arms. "You've been sleeping near the chimney, or near old straw, or near that goat again." You offer her a weak smile and step inside. The cottage is dark but warm, walls lined with jars of things in liquid. Roots, bugs, flowers, something that looks alarmingly like a shriveled finger. Dried plants hang from the beams overhead. A black cat watches you from the corner, blinking slowly as if judging every life choice you've ever made. Elswith sets you on a stool, leans in, and starts examining your skin with the gentle touch of someone who's seen it all before. and probably treated worse. You're not dying, she declares. But your blood's running hot. It's heat and filth, and nerves, maybe demons, you nod solemnly. Maybe demons. She turns to a shelf and begins mixing something in a small wooden bowl. Leaves, bark, a sprinkle of something grey. Then she pours a hot liquid over it, stirs, and hands you a rag soaked in the mixture. Rub this on your arms. Don't eat it. Don't sleep on it. Don't breathe too much while it's wet. Actually, just don't talk until tomorrow. You nod again, very seriously, and start applying the mixture. It burns slightly, but smells like mint and wet earth. Refreshing, in a stinging, possibly dangerous sort of way. As she works, Ellsworth starts talking, low and fast, a stream of commentary that's half gossip, half spell. The baker's wife has a weeping sore behind her knee. 3 pigs died last week, all from the same steer. Someone saw lights in the forest, blue ones, dancing. That means a soul's escaped, or there's something buried. You're not sure how much of this is real or just theatrical ambience, but it's comforting in its own way. You're getting treated and updated at the same time. Efficiency. She asks you about your dreams, whether you've had any strange ones lately. You mention the one with the talking fish and the rain of teeth. She pauses, nods slowly and says, that's not ideal. Then she hands you a pouch of dried herbs. Put this under your pillow. Might scare away the wrong dreams, or attract better ones. Depends on the moon. As you prepare to leave, she hands you a bottle filled with something thick and dark. If the rash spreads, no, she says, drink a teaspoon of this. Only once. If you drink it twice, your tongue will turn black and start telling secrets. You laugh nervously until you realise she's not joking. You hand her your payment. An old spoon, a slice of bread, and a promise to bring her nettle roots later in the week. She seems pleased. Tell no one you came here, she says, but also tell everyone I cured you. Classic. As you walk back through the woods, the birds chirp softly overhead. The air smells like loam and tree bark, and for the first time in days your skin feels manageable. Not cured, but better. At least you're not actively thinking about peeling your own arms off. Back in the village, you keep your head down. Not because you're ashamed, but because being seen visiting Ellsworth can be dangerous. Healing is one thing, witchcraft is another, and those two lines blur constantly. The church doesn't approve of her methods. Too earthy, too mystical, too woman. The Lord tolerates her because his wife's back stopped hurting after Ellsworth gave her a beetle-infused poultice. But if someone important suddenly decides to go full moral panic, it's her cottage that burns first. Still, everyone visits her, quietly, after dark, with bartered goods and hopeful expressions. Even the priest, you suspect, once came down with the itch, and left with a bottle that mysteriously fixed it overnight. You sit by the fire that evening, dabbing the last of the ointment onto your arms, and think about how fragile survival really is, not just physically, but socially. One wrong visit, one whispered accusation, and you could end up shackled, paraded through town, or worse. Tried as a heretic. That word gets thrown around a lot these days. Heretic. Sometimes it means she challenged church teachings, but sometimes it just means she healed someone too fast and now I feel insecure. There's an open debate among scholars, well, future scholars, about whether these wise women were actually early scientists or just glorified folk doctors. The answer is probably both. Some of them really did know their stuff, plants, infections, the rhythms of the body. Others? Total frauds who handed out mushroom tea and hoped for the best. But to you, Ellsworth is a lifeline. When nothing else works, when prayer fails, when the Lord's taxes leave you broke, when your skin is crawling with things you can't even name, she offers something. A solution, or at least a distraction. And sometimes that's all survival is, the next small solution. That night, you fall asleep more easily than usual. The herb pouch tucked under your straw-stuffed pillow. You don't dream about fish or teeth. You don't dream at all. You wake to silence, faint morning light, and the realization that your rash has faded a little. You smile. Then you hear someone scream about their goat going missing again. And just like that, the medieval morning resumes. You wake to frost creeping in through the gaps in the wall, settling quietly on the inside of your blanket like winter is politely reminding you who's in charge now. Your breath hangs in the air, a pale ghost of itself, and your toes, Well, you can't feel them, which is either deeply alarming or just another Monday. It's winter in medieval England, and you're about to experience a season that doesn't gently knock at the door so much as kick it open and demand all your food, warmth, and dignity. The cottage is silent except for the soft popping of the last embers in the hearth. The fire went out hours ago, which means you're starting your morning the old-fashioned way, freezing and bitter. Someone's already up. You can hear the shuffle of boots and the muffled curses that mean someone stubbed a toe in the dark. You pull on your stiff tunic, now slightly damp from yesterday's snowmelt and smelling faintly of wet wool and ancient onions. Nothing dries in winter. Everything is cold, including hope. Outside, the world is white and silent. Snow has blanketed the village, hiding the mud and waste, covering even the most unfortunate goat mishaps with a layer of seasonal charm. It would be beautiful if it didn't mean the start of 4 months of absolute misery. You step out and your breath catches, not from the view, but because the air is a slap to the lungs. It's the kind of cold that feels personal. Your first task is firewood, of course, always firewood. You make your way to the shared pile near the edge of the green, where a few other villagers are already hacking away at frozen logs with axes that look like they've survived 3 wars. The pile is low, too low. Everyone knows it. No one says it. You take your turn, splitting logs with stiff fingers, the axe bouncing occasionally off the wood like it's laughing at your lack of upper body strength. The cold creeps in under your fingernails, numbing them into tiny icicles. Your breath fogs the air. You start humming through clenched teeth just to keep your jaw moving. Back at your cottage, you manage to light a fire with some stubborn determination, a few dry twigs. And what might be the last scrap of kindling? The flames sputter, then catch, and you hold your hands close until your skin starts to burn. Your fingertips go from numb to stinging, and then, finally, to alive. It feels like a miracle, but warmth is temporary. Food is the real problem. The larder is nearly empty. What little you had has either frozen solid or mysteriously vanished, likely into the stomach of a neighbour with sticky fingers and an innocent face. You dig through the storage bin and find a shriveled turnip, some cracked barley, and half a smoked fish that looks like it's considering retirement. There's no foraging now, everything edible is buried under snow or dead. Hunting is a luxury, and trapping is tricky. If you're lucky, someone in the village might trade you something for your last skein of thread or a half-broken peas. If you're unlucky, you'll be boiling nettles again by week's end. You're not starving yet, but you're in what the villagers call the hunger slope, the slow downhill slide between Yule and spring, where everyone quietly tightens their belts and prays that no child coughs hard enough to stop breathing. It's a season of silence, not celebration, and with the cold comes sickness. Already you hear it spreading through the village. Harsh coughs, wheezing breaths, sniffling so intense it sounds like someone trying to start a fire with their face. People bundle themselves in wool layer up with every scrap of cloth they own and hope the sweating keeps the fever at bay. You visit the neighbours, partly to check in, partly to see who has extra food. You find one old man curled under 2 blankets, breathing slow and shallow. His daughter wipes his forehead with a damp cloth and nods to you with tired eyes. You leave quietly, unsure if he'll see the thaw. Later, you help a group of villagers reinforce the livestock pen. Wolves get bold in winter, and there have been tracks near the edge of the woods. You're not a warrior, but you are an able-bodied person who can wave a torch and yell with enthusiasm. That counts. You see your breath curl in the fading light as you hammer boards into place. The goats bleat nervously, the chickens puff up their feathers like angry snowballs, and the pigs are already sleeping in a huddle, oblivious to your efforts. They'll survive. Pigs always do, smarter than they look. Night comes early, as it always does in winter. The sun seems embarrassed to show its face for more than a few hours. By the time you return home, it's already dark. The fire is low, the air inside still freezing, and the whole cottage smells like smoke, unwashed feet, and boiled regret. You share your meagre meal with whoever's home. The turnip goes into the pot. The barley softens after an hour of simmering. The fish adds flavour, probably. You eat slowly, trying not to think about how little is left. Tomorrow you'll have to trade or risk hunger. You wrap yourself in your blanket, close to the fire, and try to fall asleep. You can hear the wind howling outside, rattling the shutters and slipping in through every crack in the wall. Your feet are ice, your nose is colder, and despite the fire you can still see your breath rising in soft, slow curls. This is winter. It's not dramatic, not sudden. It's a slow suffocation. It creeps in and settles around you. biting at your fingers, tightening your stomach, whispering old stories of villages that didn't make it. And every winter, there's at least one cottage that doesn't see the spring. But here's the strange thing. Even in the bleakness, there are sparks of beauty. The snow twinkles under moonlight. The silence is peaceful, almost holy. And every bowl of hot food, no matter how bland or small, feels like a feast. You clutch your blanket tighter, feel your eyelids grow heavy, and drift off with one final thought. Spring will come. It always does. The question is just whether or not you will live to see it. You wake up coughing, and not the polite clear-your-throat kind. This is the deep, wet kind, the kind that sounds like your lungs are trying to stage a violent uprising. Your chest aches, your throat is raw, and when you sit up, dizzy and clammy, you know exactly what this means. Someone's sick. Maybe it's you, maybe it's everyone. Maybe the entire village's luck has officially run out. And the timing? Just perfect. Because of course it's now, in the heart of winter, when everyone's already cold, starving, and too exhausted to even scream into the void. You step outside, shaky on your feet. The snow has turned to slush, grey and crusted, like it's given up pretending to be pretty. In the distance, smoke rises from chimneys, less than usual. Quiet has settled over the village, not peaceful but heavy. Ominous. You pass the neighbour's house and see a cloth hanging from the door. White. That's the signal. Someone inside is sick. You see another down the lane, and another. You stop counting after 6. No one talks about it directly. Not at first. It starts as whispers. So-and-so's coughing. A child hasn't left bed in 3 days. Someone spotted black spots on a man's legs. And then the panic starts to creep in, quiet and frantic. It's not just a winter fever. It's the plague. That word is heavy here. Even centuries before the most famous outbreak, there's always been something lurking. Waves of illness that sweep through villages and towns like invisible curses. You don't need to know the science to recognise the signs. People drop fast. One day they're fine, the next they're gasping in a pile of straw, their breath thick and shallow, their skin hot as fire and cold as death at the same time. You return home and shut the door, pushing a sack of flour against it like that will help. Someone sneezes inside and everyone jumps. You all look at each other like suspects in a mystery no one wants to solve. The truth is, if one person in the house gets, you probably all will. There's no real isolation, no quarantine zones. Just shared air, shared blankets, shared doom. You boil water. For drinking, for soaking cloths, for pretending you're doing something useful. The fire is stoked until the whole room is hot and smoky. Because for once, you want heat. Not just for comfort, but in some desperate hope that it'll sweat the sickness out of the walls. It won't, but you need to believe something can. Word spreads that the Reeves wife is sick, then the blacksmith, then the priest. A small group gathers near the well, arguing whether to bless it or fill it in. Someone burns seed, someone else burns the sage burner. Panic doesn't look like screaming mobs. It looks like confusion, rituals, and an overwhelming sense of being completely powerless. By midday, the road into the village is blocked with a crude sign. Just a wooden stake with the word "Keep Out" carved into it. You don't know who put it there, but you're not surprised. Villages don't want to be associated with outbreaks. If anyone gets word that your town is infected, the next visitors might be men with torches instead of traders. A friar from another parish shows up at the edge of the wood and is immediately pelted with snowballs and shouted at to leave. He yells back that this is unchristian. Someone replies that so is dying from mysterious boils. The friar wisely turns around. By late afternoon you feel worse. Not the others yet, just you. Your head swims. You can't stop sweating. Food makes you gag, even the idea of it. You wrap yourself in everything soft and crawl into the corner like an injured animal. Someone puts a cool rag on your forehead. It smells like mint and desperation. You drift in and out. Fever dreams start. You see faces. Some you know, some you don't. You see rats crawling through the thatch, their tiny black eyes glittering. You hear bells, you hear crying. You hear the priest chanting in Latin, even though he hasn't left his bed in 2 days. And then the strangest thing happens. Someone starts burning herbs outside your door. Not just one person, a group. It's Elswith, the wise woman, leading a little ritual. They're waving bundles of dried yarrow, sage, juniper, anything that smells like it might chase death away. The smoke curls into the house, thick and strange. It chokes, then soothes. You slip deeper into sleep. At some point during the night you wake. You're drenched. Not with sweat this time, but with the shivering aftermath of a broken fever. Someone's sitting beside you, dabbing your forehead, muttering softly. You can't make out the words, but it's something like a prayer, or a lullaby, or maybe both. You drift off again. The next morning you're alive, which is a win. You feel hollowed out like your soul's been wrung like a cloth, but you're breathing. Around you others are stirring. The worst seems to have passed, at least for now, but not everyone made it. The Reeves wife didn't, neither did the old blacksmith. 2 children from a nearby hut are gone too. The priest recovers enough to ring the bell, not for service but for mourning. It tolls slowly, each clang a reminder of who isn't coming back. You help dig graves that afternoon, the ground still frozen and unforgiving. It takes hours. Your back screams, your hands a blister, but the dead must be buried. That's one rule everyone follows, even when all others fail. Later, the village gathers for a small ceremony. No sermon, no choirs, just a few words, some tears, and a moment of silence so heavy it crushes your chest. And then, just like that, life stumbles forward again. Because it has to. There's an open debate, even centuries later, about what these early outbreaks truly were. Bubonic plague, typhus, smallpox, or something else entirely. No one agrees, but in the moment it doesn't matter. To you it was a shadow passing through your home, brushing against your skin and deciding arbitrarily, unfairly, to spare you. As you sit beside the fire that night, throat sore, body weak, you look around and see life beginning again in slow, careful movements. Someone's cooking a thin stew. A baby starts to cry. The chickens are still alive. Ellsworth walks past your window with her bundle of herbs and gives a tiny nod. You nod back. The plague came. It stayed just long enough to remind you of your place in this world. Small, fragile, one cold wind away from nothing. But you're still here, and that, in medieval terms, is a miracle. The village is quiet, but not in the ominous, cough in the corner way it was last week. No, this is quiet is different. It's focused, heavy, the kind of quiet that settles over people preparing for something big. Or in your case, something terrifying. Because today is the day you've been roped into weapons training. That's right, you, a peasant who can barely split firewood without pulling something in your back, are about to be handed a real weapon and told to swing it at things. For defence, they say. For the realm. But you know the truth. The Lord needs more bodies with swords, and you're one of the unlucky limbs he picked. It starts early, of course. Before dawn, you're shaken awake by a boy barely old enough to hold a chicken. Training day, he mutters, then runs off, probably to warn the next poor soul. You roll out of bed, bones creaking like a windmill in need of oil, and throw on your sturdiest rags, thick wool trousers, a patched tunic, and the one belt that doesn't immediately unravel when tugged. Not exactly battle gear, but it's all you've got. Outside, a few dozen others have already gathered near the open field behind the chapel, some yawning, some stretching, some already looking for excuses to limp home. At the front stands Sir Roderick, the local knight and professional helmet model. He's tall, broad, and very shiny. His armour gleams in the weak morning light, which is impressive considering the rest of you look like a herd of exhausted goats. Sir Roderick doesn't waste time. You're not soldiers, he says, pacing like a schoolmaster, but you might need to act like soldiers. War waits for no man, and your lord expects you to be ready. Everyone shifts uncomfortably. There's talk of raids. There's always talk of raids, sometimes from across the border, sometimes from across the next hill. The truth is, most peasants never see war up close, but when it comes, it doesn't knock. It kicks down doors and sets your thatch roof on fire. The first thing Sir Roderick hands you is a wooden practice sword. It's heavy, heavier than expected, like wielding a fence post made of regret. Your first swing nearly takes off your own knee. He watches, unimpressed. Try again, he grunts. You do, and again, and again. Each time the weight of the sword travels down your arm, through your spine and into your ancestors. Your hands blister by the third swing, by the sixth you're panting. Now, Roderick says, let's put you in armour. You laugh. You shouldn't have, because moments later a squire drags over a dented, soot-stained set of chainmail and drops it at your feet like a pile of punishment. It smells of rust, sweat, and something disturbingly sweet. You lift it slowly, as if handling a sleeping bear. Putting it on feels like being wrapped in wet iron. It pulls at your shoulders. It sags at your hips. And the helmet, forget it. You can barely see, and when you can, it's just your own breath fogging up the air inside. Once everyone's geared up, or as close as possible, training begins in earnest. You're taught how to hold a sword, how to block with a shield, and how to stand without immediately falling over. It's harder than it looks. You've spent your life digging, lifting, and sweating jaw. But this is a different kind of pain. This is new muscles screaming at old ones. Eventually, you're paired off with another villager. You face each other awkwardly, holding your wooden swords like overcooked sausages. Sir Roderick shouts, "Begin!" and immediately steps back to watch the carnage. You and your opponent swing at each other with all the precision of two blindfolded chickens. Your swords clash. Yours bounces off their shoulder. Theirs hits your thigh and leaves a bruise you'll be nursing for a week. A nearby pair accidentally collide heads and fall to the ground in a tangle of limbs and apologies. Sir Roderick sighs loudly. "You're not warriors," he says. "You're cabbages with legs." After more drills, more bruises, and a brief session of "this is how not to stab yourself in the foot," you're finally given a break. You collapse onto the grass and remove your helmet, sucking in air like it owes you money. Sweat clings to your skin. Your arms feel like jelly. Your spine has filed a formal complaint. Beside you, someone vomits quietly into a bush. Another man is cradling his hand, muttering, "It's just dislocated, it's fine, it'll go back." No one believes him. Then come the lectures. Sir Roderick walks among the groups, detailing the importance of discipline, how to march in formation, and, most crucially, how to hold your line even when arrows start falling. That last part earns a few side glances, because the truth is, the moment arrows fall, half of you will be running toward the woods screaming. You're also taught about the chain of command, which is simple. Obey everyone above you, no matter how ridiculous their orders sound. If your commander says charge into a bog, you charge. If they say hold position while fire rains down from the sky, you hold. If they say pretend to be a dead tree, you wave your arms like branches and pray the enemy is near-sighted. And then there's the archery demonstration. Sir Roderick calls over a man who looks like he was carved out of wood and bad decisions. He notches an arrow, pulls back with practiced ease, and fires into a straw dummy across the field. Bullseye. He does it again and again. Each shot lands with a satisfying thunk. Then he hands you the bow. It's a long bow. It's taller than you. You try to draw it and immediately regret every choice you've ever made. The tension is incredible. Your arms shake. Your shoulder pops. The arrow launches 2 feet and drops like a sad twig. Sir Roderick doesn't even blink. "Needs work," he says. "Next." A late afternoon. Training ends with a warning. "If the call comes, you'll fight, whether you're ready or not." And then casually he adds, "Oh, and don't forget to practice with the pike next week." You walk home limping, armour slung over your shoulder, wooden sword tucked under one arm like it might magically protect you from everything. Your body aches, your pride is bruised. You've never felt less heroic in your life, but deep down you get it. War doesn't care if you're ready, it just shows up, and when it does you better know which end of the sword to hold. As you collapse into bed that night, arms trembling, you whisper to yourself, "Please, dear God, let there be peace for one more season." Because let's be honest, you're not ready. But then again, no one ever is. You're still sore from training. Every muscle in your body hums with betrayal, especially your thighs, which now feel like bags of wet gravel. But soreness is the least of your worries, because the next morning you're handed a spear taller than you are and told, very politely, by medieval standards, that you're being drafted for war. Just like that. No ceremony, no thank you for your service, just a gruff voice saying, "Pack a second." We march at dawn. As if you're supposed to know what packing even looks like when you own a grand total of 2 tunics, half a spoon, and an aggressive goose that doesn't travel well. The village reeve informs you it's the king's call. His Majesty needs bodies for some campaign in France or Wales, or maybe just down the road, depending on which noble got into a wine-fueled argument this time. No one seems entirely clear on the details. What you do know is that you're going, you don't have a choice, and you're not coming back quickly, if at all. You say goodbye to your family with the emotional range of a damp rag. No one wants to cry in public. Not here. The goodbye is more like an exchange of nods, a silent contract between those leaving and those staying behind to tend goats, watch the skies, and hope the plague doesn't visit again. You join the others on the edge of the village, a ragtag group of half-trained men and boys in ill-fitting armour and leather boots that haven't been dry since Michaelmas. A few veterans shuffle among you, scowling. One is missing a thumb, another is wrapped in so many layers he resembles a sentient haystack. Then comes the marching. All day. through fields, over hills, and along muddy tracks where your boots stick like the earth itself is trying to eat you. You sleep in barns, under carts, or just curled up in a ditch. Rations are handed out, hard bread, dried peas, and something that's technically meat. You chew it for so long you begin to wonder if it's not just meat shaped like regret. Eventually your group joins a larger force, a proper army, or at least the medieval equivalent of one. There are knights on horses, banners flapping in the wind, and a handful of cooks boiling suspicious stews in cauldrons the size of bathtubs. It's chaos, loud, smelly, terrifying chaos. You're handed a real weapon, a spear so long it could double as a lightning rod, and a battered shield with someone else's initials carved into it. You're shown how to form a line, how to march in step, how not to stab your neighbour by accident. These are not guarantees, just goals. The commander, a man with a moustache that looks independently alive, gives you a speech. It's supposed to inspire courage, something about glory, honour and defending your homeland. You mostly hear, "Don't die in the mud." As for where you're going, some castle somewhere, the enemy is holed up there. Apparently they've been refusing to pay taxes, or maybe they insulted someone's horse. Again, details are murky. War in this age is rarely about principles. It's about land, pride, and whose dad used to own what 200 years ago. On the march, you get to know your fellow conscripts. One's a brewer who's never held a weapon, another's a chimney sweep who's certain this is all a dream. Then there's Big Malk, who claims to have killed 3 men with a spoon, but has yet to correctly identify North. And of course, there are camp rumours, that the enemy has war elephants, that they pour boiling tar on prisoners, that one of their knights has a cursed sword that sings before it strikes. None of it's true, probably, but it fills the long wet nights when you're lying on the ground, listening to the symphony of 100 men snoring and one guy absolutely failing at playing the lute. After days, maybe weeks, time blurs when every morning is damp, you arrive. The castle looms on a distant hill, grey and toothy against the sky. It's smaller than you expected, but imposing all the same. The soldiers around you grow quiet. You're told to prepare for a siege, which means digging trenches, building ramps, setting up catapults, and trying not to think too hard about the fact that you might be launching rocks at people who are also just trying to stay alive. You see them on the walls sometimes, tiny silhouettes pacing back and forth. Are they scared? Probably. Are they better armed? Also probably. The camp buzzes with noise and smoke, fires crackle, horses whinny. Someone screams in the distance, but it's unclear whether it's pain, panic, or just stepping on something sharp. There's a tension in the air, like the sky itself is holding its breath. One morning you're woken before dawn and handed a torch. Tonight, your sergeant says, we storm the outer wall. Your heart drops straight into your boots. You march forward at twilight, hidden by fog and nerves. The world is a blur of movement, men shouting, firelight dancing, ladders rising against stone. You climb slowly, every step a gamble. Arrows rain down, someone beside you falls, you keep going. You don't remember why, you just do. By some miracle you reach the top. Chaos erupts, shouting, clashing, confusion. You swing your spear like a broom in a crowded tavern. You don't know who you hit. You don't know if it helped, but you're alive. Eventually the defenders retreat. The castle falls. You expect celebration. Instead, there's looting, screaming, fires where there shouldn't be. The line between victory and horror fades quickly. You stay back, clinging to your spear, watching the worst parts of humanity parade by in torchlight. That night, you sit by a fire and stare into the flames. You're no hero, just a survivor, and that's all anyone really becomes in war. The next morning, the march begins again. No one tells you how long you'll be gone. There's no guarantee of pay. No certainty you'll see your village again. All you have now is a weapon, a cloak that smells like every nightmare you've ever had, and a memory of how it felt to survive your first siege. War in medieval England isn't a tale of glory, it's a long, muddy journey, with blisters, smoke, and more fear than your bones can carry. But you're still standing, and that's more than some can say. You don't remember exactly when the siege started. One day you're marching through fields that smelled vaguely like wet sheep and barley, and the next you're standing in a trench staring at a stone wall and wondering if this is how it ends, ankle deep in mud, wearing someone else's boots, holding a shield that is basically just a glorified dinner plate. The enemy's stronghold looms ahead like a miserable birthday cake, grey, lopsided, and absolutely unwilling to share anything. Life during a siege isn't about action, it's about waiting. Long, slow, bitter days filled with chores that all feel designed to kill your spirit before anything else does. Dig here, haul rocks there, stoke the fire, carry the boilers-out pitch carefully. No one forgets the lad who spilled it on his foot and now limps around with a sock full of regret. Your back aches from sleeping on frozen earth. Your nose won't stop running. Your boots have fused permanently to your feet. You haven't been dry since last Thursday. And worst of all, you're bored, which is something they don't tell you about sieges. You imagine battle, glory, at the very least adrenaline. But instead, it's endless hours of nothing interrupted by 10 minutes of complete chaos. You spend most of the time just trying not to die of boredom, dysentery, or some combination of both. Occasionally the enemy throws insults over the wall, some of them surprisingly creative. There's one guy with a voice like a bard and the soul of a roastmaster colonel who spends every evening inventing new ways to mock your army's hygiene, lineage, and personal lives. One night he shouts, "Your cook's stew tastes like a monk's underpants," and gets a round of applause from both sides of the battlefield. Honestly, you'd defect just to hang out with him. The soldiers try to keep morale up. Some gamble, some sing, others whittle tiny wooden horses or pass around the same 3 jokes like a sacred ritual. You trade stories with the guy next door to you, a farmer turned archer named Wren who once got kicked in the head by a cow and swears it made him smarter. He shows you a wooden charm he wears under his tunic, says it keeps him from getting shot. You don't believe him, but you start looking at the charm with envy. Food is, well, let's just say the siege diet is not recommended by any future nutritionists. Hardtack, onion broth, sometimes dried fish that tastes like it already died twice. When things get dire, the rats start disappearing. You don't ask questions, you just chew. Water's worse. The supply wagon got cut off last week, so now you're drinking boiled mud and pretending it's soup. Someone finds a barrel of wine in an abandoned farmhouse and things get rowdy for one glorious night, until 3 people vomit into the same fire, and the smell makes everyone nostalgic for latrines. On day 20-something, your commander gathers you and announces it's time for the final push. That phrase alone makes your stomach churn. You're given a pike, a torch and a pep talk that's half inspiring, half horrifying. The plan is simple. Under cover of darkness, your squad will storm the outer wall again, this time with a battering ram and more enthusiasm. You crouch behind a makeshift barricade, heart pounding. The moon is high. Fog rolls in like a blessing, muffling sound and hiding movement. The ram is pushed forward by 6 unlucky souls, you among them. It creaks and groans just like your knees. The closer you get to the gate, the more it feels like someone else's dream, or someone's very bad idea of a prank. Then the arrows start. They rain down from the battlements in sharp hissing waves. One embeds itself in the wooden ram. Another hits the man behind you and he goes down without sound. You keep pushing. The gate looms ahead. Someone yells. You hit the wood once, twice, 3 times. The ram splinters. The gate holds. Then something hits the ground nearby, a pot of boiling oil followed by screams. You don't look back, you just run, dragging what's left of the ram and your dignity. Retreat is called. You scramble back to the trench, hands raw, lungs on fire. You lie on your back, staring at the sky, wondering if the stars always look this sharp or if it's just the adrenaline. Beside you, Wren laughs. Just once, bitter and breathless. "Still here," he mutters. You nod. Still here. Barely. The next few days are quiet. Too quiet. Then comes a miracle, or what passes for one in this mess. The enemy surrenders, no one knows why. Maybe they ran out of food. Maybe their morale snapped. Maybe your side finally managed to bribe someone inside. Either way, a white flag appears one morning and everything changes. You expect cheers, celebrations. Instead, the camp just exhales. No one moves. Everyone is waiting for the next order. And then it comes, inside. You walk through the castle gates like an intruder in a ghost story. The defenders are thin, ragged, eyes sunken. There's no fight left in them. Some cry, others spit. You're told to take supplies, to secure the grounds, to look for survivors. But what you see instead are reminders that these were just people. Not monsters, not villains, just hungry, scared and unlucky. The looting starts anyway, not by you, but by others. Rooms ransacked, food taken, horses claimed. You wander through the great hall and see smashed plates, blood on the walls, a half-eaten loaf of bread on the table. as if someone had been interrupted mid-bite. You feel sick. That night you sit alone, watching smoke curl from the towers. The siege is over. You survived. But the weight of it settles in your bones. You think of the man who died beside you. You think of the castle cook, hanged for refusing to kneel. You think of the enemy soldier who gave you water during the retreat, then vanished in the chaos. War doesn't give you medals, it gives you silence, scars, and a long walk back. And so the next morning you pack your few belongings, less than you left with, and prepare to return. Back to your village, back to mud and chickens and rationed bread. You're not the same, you know it. The road ahead is the same, but you are not. You survived a siege, and in this world, that's all you can really hope for. You hear the crowd before you see it. A rising murmur of voices, shuffling feet, and the kind of tension that fills the air like static before a storm. You've only been back in the village a week, still nursing a bruised rib and the emotional weight of siege survival, and already you're being pulled toward the town green by the elbow. You don't want to miss this, someone whispers, eyes wide. You want to say you. Actually, I probably do, but the crowd's too thick and your curiosity too stubborn. When you reach the square, the atmosphere hits you like a brick wall. No laughter, no gossip, just silence, with the occasional cough or whispered prayer. At the centre of it all, a wooden platform, hastily built but sturdy, sits beneath a draped banner bearing the crest of the local lord. And standing beside it, two guards with grim expressions and axes too sharp to be decorative. You immediately know what this is. Today is an execution. The condemned stands between them, bound at the wrists and looking surprisingly calm. He's middle-aged, bearded, and dressed in the kind of clothes that suggest he was someone of mild importance, perhaps a steward or a clerk. Not a common thief, certainly not a noble. Just one of those in-between types with enough education to be annoying and not enough power to be protected. What did he do? You murmur to the woman beside you. She shrugs. Forgery, they say, or maybe treason, or maybe he just angered someone above his station. Classic. In medieval England, execution isn't always about what you did. It's often about who you did it to, and whether that person has a cousin in court. You don't need to steal gold or poison a well. Sometimes all it takes is scribbling the wrong signature, or saying something clever to the wrong person. A herald steps forward and begins reading the charges. His voice is flat, rehearsed. The list is long, as it always is. Treason, blasphemy, sowing unrest, failure to respect the crown, probably overdue library books as well. The details are vague and the crowd doesn't care. They didn't come for nuance. They came for the show, and that's what this is, a show. Performance designed to remind everyone watching who's in charge, who makes the rules, and what happens when you forget your place. The platform, the banners, the speech, it's all theatre. Grim, bloody theatre. Then the executioner appears. Hooded, of course, because anonymity makes brutality more palatable. He carries a broad axe over one shoulder, the blade freshly honed and glinting in the late morning sun. It's heavier than it looks. You can see it in his gait, in the way he steps like a man trying not to slip on the wet wood of his own conscience. The condemned is led forward, made to kneel. The priest steps up beside him, murmuring last rites, a cross raised like a shield. The man nods, offers a few final words that you can't hear, and then silence. Real silence. Not the murmuring crowd kind, but the kind that sucks the air out of your lungs. The axe rises, it falls, and everything changes. It doesn't go cleanly, of course, it rarely does. One strike is almost never enough. There's a second, a third, a sickening sound, a gasp from the crowd, someone fainting. Blood on the boards, blood on the boots, and when it's done, the executioner steps back, breathing heavily. The head is held aloft briefly because what's the point of a warning if no one sees it? Then tossed into a basket like yesterday's bread crust. You've seen death on the battlefield, in the trenches. But this is different. This is calculated, cold, controlled, and somehow more disturbing than any chaotic clash of swords. A guard announces that justice has been served as if that's what this was. As if justice has anything to do with politics and public fear. The crowd begins to disperse slowly, people turning away with the same expressions they use after a bad harvest. Resigned, hollow, a little nauseated. You linger for a moment, watching as the blood is mopped up with straw. Someone mutters a prayer, someone else spits. A group of boys stand off to the side, arguing whether the head blinked. You walk away before the conversation gets any darker. Back in the village, life resumes almost immediately. A woman starts kneading bread. Children chase geese. A man sharpens his scythe like the morning didn't happen. And that's the real horror of it. How quickly people normalise the spectacle. Because they have to. If they stopped to feel it fully every time, no one would ever get out of bed again. You sit by your cottage door, staring at your hands, wondering if this will be you someday. Not the accused, though that's always a risk, but the witness. The one who watches and does nothing. You didn't cheer, you didn't boo, you just stood there frozen, part of the machine that turns justice into entertainment. There's a historical debate about whether medieval executions were more about deterrence or dominance. The truth, they were both. A warning and a reminder. Step out of line and your neck might meet the axe too. Especially if you're educated, especially if you speak up, especially if you forget your place. The next morning the platform is gone, the blood is gone, the banners are rolled up. But in your mind, the sound of that axe still echoes, blunt and final. And now you understand something you hadn't before. Survival in this world isn't just about food, shelter or avoiding disease. It's about silence, about keeping your head down, literally. You don't sleep well that night. The image of the execution plays behind your eyelids like a loop. You promise yourself you'll stay quiet, stay obedient, stay small. Because small things don't get noticed. And things that don't get noticed don't end up kneeling in the square with a priest whispering in their ear and a hooded man swinging a blade. And that, as grim as it is, might be your best chance. After the execution, the village breathes more cautiously. Everyone's a little quieter, a little more careful with their words, like fear itself has taken up residence just outside the church door and no one wants to invite it in. Even the geese seem to honk less. You spend your days keeping your head down, doing what's asked and never what's questioned. You've grown sharper at navigating silence, but that doesn't mean your thoughts have stopped. They've just gone underground, like everything else in winter. Then one grey morning, something unusual happens. The priest approaches you, clutching a parchment like it's made of dragon skin. He clears his throat with the confidence of someone who knows they can't be ignored. You've been invited, he says, to the priory. You blink. That's not a sentence people usually hear. Me? Yes, you. For possible inclusion. Inclusion in what? A sermon? A punishment? A choir that sings in Latin and doesn't allow goats? No, the priest explains. It's the monastery. Or more specifically, the life of a monastic service. They are looking for someone with a strong back, a quiet tongue, and a soul unburdened by too many sins. And apparently, you just made the cut, you're sent to pack. There's nothing to pack. One tunic, one pair of boots, a knife with a cracked handle. That's it. You say goodbye to the cottage like you're closing a chapter, half relieved, half unsure whether you're being rescued or recruited into a different kind of cage. The monastery sits a few miles outside the village, surrounded by low hills and thick woods. The air smells different there. Cleaner somehow, though that might just be because no one's cooking turnips over a dung fire. Stone walls rise up, modest but proud, topped with carefully laid tiles that don't leak every time it rains. A bell tower looms in the centre, casting a long shadow over the cloisters. Everything is still, like the world here has been muted. You're led inside by a novice monk, who walks like someone who has never tripped in his life. He speaks little. He opens the heavy wooden door, nods once, and gestures you through. You cross a threshold and feel for a moment like you've left England entirely. The inside is dark and cool, lit by narrow windows and rows of flickering candles. You're taken to the abbot, a wiry man with kind eyes and a voice like a creaky stair. He explains the rules: early rising, constant prayer, manual labour, no meat except on feast days, and, most importantly, silence except during designated hours. You nod to all of it. You've already spent most of your life with little food, little sleep, and no say in anything. This won't be so different. Your room is small, a cell really, with a straw mattress, a small desk and a single wooden cross above the door. You sit on the bed, listening to the quiet hum of wind against stone. There are no pigs outside, no screaming neighbours, no one threatening you with tithes or torches. It feels safe, for now. Monastic life begins early. The bell rings long before the sun shows up. You rise, dress, and shuffle into the chapel with the other brothers, all of you hooded and half asleep. Matins, the first prayer, is sung in Latin, a language you barely grasp but have heard enough to fake convincingly. You murmur along, staring at the stained glass windows, waiting for light to bleed through. After prayers, you head to the workrooms. Today, you're assigned to the scriptorium, a place that smells like old paper and candle wax. Monks bend over parchment, copying religious texts with steady hands and infinite patience. You're given the task of trimming vellum. Scraping it smooth for writing. It's delicate, tedious, and strangely satisfying. Your fingers hurt, but at least they're not hauling rocks or scrubbing latrines. Over the next few days, you fall into a rhythm. Bells mark the hours, rears begin and end the daylight. Meals are silent and simple, bread, beans, watery ale. The monks eat slowly, thoughtfully, their heads bowed like every crumb is a sermon. There's a peculiar kind of peace here. It's not joy, not the raucous kind you used to feel at solstice bonfires or after surviving a near miss with a swinging axe, but a softer sort, a quietness in the bones. No one here yells, no one threatens, there's structure, routine, predictability, and yet you feel something else creeping in, boredom. The days blend together. The chants are beautiful, but after the 100th repetition, they blur into background hums, the silence is calming, until it isn't. Until it starts to feel like you're disappearing. Like you're no longer a person, just a hooded shape in a long line of other shapes, all shuffling from prayer to labour to sleep. You begin to notice small rebellions. A monk who doodles tiny dragons in the margins of his manuscripts. Another who smuggles cloves into the kitchen to spice the bland pottage. One night, you catch a whispered conversation in the cloister. Two brothers arguing about whether the earth truly must be the centre of creation, or whether perhaps it moves. You pretend not to hear. You've learnt that sense protects more than sanctity. There's an open, scholarly debate centuries later about whether monasteries were repressive institutions or beacons of preservation and learning. The answer is yes, both. They kept knowledge alive when the world was on fire, but they also smothered curiosity if it flickered too brightly. After 2 weeks, you're offered a choice: remain permanently, take vows, and devote yourself fully, or return to village life. It should be an easy decision. Here, you're fed, clothed, protected. You're not at risk of being conscripted, taxed into oblivion, or beheaded in public. But you're also invisible. You stand in the chapel alone one evening, staring at the crucifix above the altar. You whisper, not to God exactly, but to yourself. Do I want to live or just survive? There's no answer, but the silence feels less comforting now, less sacred, more suffocating. You thank the abbot the next morning and decline the vows. He doesn't seem surprised. He just nods, blesses you, and hands you a crust of bread for the road. You walk away from the monastery with a strange mixture of guilt and relief. Back in the village, life has not changed. The same mud, the same crows, the same man yelling about his goat, but you walk differently now. You've tasted stillness, structure, and stability, and decided it wasn't quite freedom. You're not sure what it was, but you know now what you're not. You're not a monk. And in a world that demands so much silence, that choice might be your loudest act yet. You don't talk about the monastery much when you return, not because it was awful, but because explaining it to people who've never known silence longer than a minute is like describing fire to a fish. They ask, "Did you see any gold?" and "Did they make you eat rats?" One child asks if you are allowed to dance. You shake your head at the question, not the answer. The truth is too layered for villagers whose days revolve around pigs, ploughs, and whether their thatch roof will collapse before Easter. But back in your old rhythms, if hauling mud and surviving winter can be called a rhythm, you start to notice the quiet changes. You've slowed a bit. You take more care with your tasks. You listen more. And strangely, you find yourself craving something less structured, less holy, a little wild. Which is why when someone whispers about a gathering in the woods for the upcoming solstice, you don't even pretend to hesitate. You just nod and say, "I'll be there." The solstice marks the darkest night of the year. Most people in the village still know this, even if the church would rather you forget. Officially, sorry, pal, it's just another day in Advent. Unofficially, it's a night when the old ways creep back out of the shadows and the forest becomes more than just a place to gather firewood and spot alarming animal tracks. You bundle up at dusk, layer on your heaviest wool cloak and sneak out past the fields, your breath fogging in the air like nervous smoke. You follow a footpath only visible to those who've walked it before, winding between ash trees and under moss-draped branches that seem to reach out and whisper in languages older than Latin. When you arrive at the clearing, you're not surprised by what you see. A ring of villagers, young, old, somewhere in between, gathered around a central bonfire that already crackles and snaps like it knows something you don't. The flames throw shadows onto bark and bone, onto faces half illuminated, half lost in flicker. Someone is playing a drum made of stretched hide and worn wood. Another hums softly, the melody ancient and circular, like a chant but earthier, hungrier. No one speaks when you enter, they just make space for you in the circle. There's food, spiced bread, roasted roots, a pot of mulled cider that smells like oranges, and something delightfully forbidden. You take a cup and sip. It burns in your chest like honesty. You realise how long it's been since you tasted anything made for joy and not survival. The elder leading the gathering, an old woman named Wenna with eyes like iron and a voice like moss, steps forward and begins the invocation. She doesn't shout, she doesn't sermonise, she just speaks, calling on the seasons, the sun, the bones beneath the soil. You don't understand every word, but your body does. It shivers, not from cold, but from recognition. Wenna walks the circle with a bundle of herbs smouldering in her hands. She waves it over each of you, the smoke tracing strange paths through the air. You close your eyes and breathe it in. It smells like rosemary, sage, and a hint of something darker, mugwort maybe, or memory. When she passes you, she mutters something under her breath. You don't catch it, but you feel it settle in your chest like an answer to a question you hadn't yet asked. The fire roars higher as the night deepens. People begin to chant, not loudly, not with forced cheer, but with a low resonance that seems to come from the ground itself. You join in, unsure of the words, but understanding the tone. It's not worship, it's not performance. It's remembrance of the old gods, the old ways, the old world before bishops and bells. Someone throws a handful of something into the fire, dried herbs, perhaps, or bits of bone. The sparks shoot up in a sudden plume, and everyone cheers quietly, like acknowledging that the night hasn't won. Not yet. And then, slowly, the circle begins to break apart. Some people dance, others simply sway. A few sit on logs and stare into the fire as if trying to remember something just out of reach. You find yourself laughing softly, suddenly, with no real reason, just because it feels good to hear your own voice in the cold. Eventually, Wenna returns to the centre. She holds up a carved wooden symbol, a sun wheel, decorated with ivy, and places it gently in the flames. For the turning, she says, for the return of light. You watch it burn, Mercy, not with sadness, but with the strange comfort that comes from watching something end and knowing something new is just behind it. That's what this night is. Not a celebration of darkness, but an acknowledgement of it. You face it. You name it. You outlast it. As the fire dies down and people begin to trickle away, you walk home slowly, the frost crunching beneath your feet, your breath steady, your mind quiet. No one talks about this night during the day. If they do, it's only in knowing glances and half-jokes. Because the church forbids these rituals now. Too pagan, too primal, too alive. And yet they continue. Because not even centuries of doctrine can erase the pull of the old ways. The ones tied to seasons and stars, to trees and stones, to the rhythm of blood and breath. These rituals persist in whispers and shadows, in festivals masked as harvest feasts and solstice gatherings held just for fun. But you know better. There's a reason the old gods still sleep beneath the hills, a reason the fields respond to fire and song, a reason the villagers still leave small offerings at crossroads and mutter blessings in the old tongue when the first frost comes early. You may live under the church, you may pay your tithes, recite your prayers and bow to saints, but tonight, in the woods, under the full moon and the dancing smoke, you remembered something older, something buried deep in your bones, and tomorrow, when the sun rises a little earlier, when the wind feels slightly less cruel, you'll remember why. Because survival isn't just about food and fire, it's also about belief. Even the quiet, outlawed kind. You don't even steal the bread. You just pick it up, that's it. A heel of dark rye left out on a stone wall behind the baker's hut, probably forgotten or maybe just drying in the sun before it gets tossed to the pigs. Your stomach's been growling since dawn, your hands are blistered from threshing oats, and your brain decides for the briefest moment that this crumb of bread is a gift from God. You're halfway through your first bite when a voice rings out behind you. Thief! It's the baker's wife. elbow deep in dough and fury, her face redder than the fire she bakes with. She points one floury hand at you like you've just set her roof ablaze. The shouting draws attention, which is never good. Within seconds, people are pouring out of doorways. The reeve appears, naturally, moving at the speed of someone who lives for this sort of thing. You try to explain it was just lying there. You were hungry, no one said don't touch it. But reason is not a recognised form of currency here. You're grabbed by the arm, marched through the village like a criminal, and dumped in front of the manor's steward, who looks up from his parchment with the expression of someone bored of justice but obligated to serve it anyway. The baker's wife gives her account, dramatic, breathless, and peppered with phrases like brazen daylight robbery and deliberate gluttonous intent. The steward sighs, asks you to speak. You try, but your words sound small compared to hers. Everyone's already decided you're guilty. Why? Because you're poor. And you're standing in front of someone who isn't. You're given 3 options: pay a fine, 5 pence, which might as well be 50 pesos, since you don't have a single coin to your name, spend a day in the stocks, or take a flogging and be done with it. You choose the stocks. The structure sits at the edge of the green, always ready, always waiting. A wooden frame with holes for your hands and head, designed not just to restrain you but to humiliate you. You're locked in mid-morning. The sun is high, weisem sus, our peasant. Your neck aches almost immediately. At first, people just glance as they walk past. Then come the comments. Should have kept your hands to yourself. Was the crust worth it? Thief's neck looks a bit long, maybe it's for stretching. You bite your tongue, literally. There's a weird splinter in the wood and it keeps catching your lip. Then someone throws something, a lump of turnip, then a clump of mud, then something wet and probably once alive. You can't wipe your face, you can't turn your head, you just take it. Because the point isn't punishment, it's performance. The community flexing its power, reminding itself that there is order here. Even if that order is cruel, uneven, and deeply allergic to nuance. A child spits on your shoulder. An old man leans in and mutters, I stole bread once, lost 2 fingers. He doesn't show you which. He just walks away, chuckling. The stocks are more than just uncomfortable. They're dangerous. You're exposed to weather, animals, even to revenge. Last spring, a man died in them, dehydration and exposure. No one talks about it anymore, but you remember. Mid-afternoon, the steward returns, says you'll be released by sundown. This should remind you to respect property, he says, as if the idea of owning bread is something sacred. You want to ask him a question, something simple like, if I starve to death in a field, is that respecting property too? But your mouth is dry, your jaw aches, and you've already learned today that questions are just another form of misbehaviour. When they finally release you, your legs nearly give out. You stagger to a water barrel, scoop a handful to your lips, and try not to throw up from the smell of whatever was thrown at you. A few villagers glance your way, eyes soft with pity, but no one says a word. Pity doesn't get you dinner. It just leaves a bad taste in your mouth. You limp home and collapse by the fire. No one mentions what happened. They don't need to. Everyone knows. You're the one who took the bread. That label will stick for a while no matter how unjust. It's your new identity. Right next to serf, field hand, and hopefully not next in the stocks. And the irony? The baker's wife probably fed that loaf to her dog the next day, but you stole it, so now you're the villain. It's funny, in a horrible, medieval kind of way. Later that night you think about crime, what it means, what it doesn't. In this world, theft isn't about taking, it's about who you took from. If a noble cheats his tenants, that's called management. If a peasant pockets a coin dropped in the dirt, that's treason. There's an open debate among future historians about how harsh medieval justice really was. Some say it was pragmatic, based on local custom, flexible, more about restitution than revenge. Others argue it was brutal, arbitrary, and disproportionately cruel to the poor. Honestly, both are right. It depends. On the lord, on the reeve. On how many people in your village already think you're a little shifty. You've heard stories of ears being cut off, of hands chopped, of men tied to stakes in freezing rivers, not to kill them, but to correct them. You've heard worse too, rumours of execution for something as small as hunting rabbits in the Lord's forest. And here you are, marked as a criminal of bread. You don't feel guilt, just exhaustion, and a sharp awareness that next time you'll have to be quicker, or quieter, or luckier. because it will happen again. Hunger doesn't care about law, cold doesn't ask permission, and if survival is a crime, then you're already guilty. But for now, you rest. Tomorrow you go back to the fields, because the law might break you, but the land still needs tilling. And you've got nothing left but the strength in your hands and a lingering bruise around your neck where the stocks held you tight. You know it's bad when the birds go silent. That eerie, weightless quiet drapes over the village like fog, not thick enough to stop you from moving, but just enough to make every step feel like it echoes. Something is off today, the kind of off that even the goats feel. You find one standing in a corner staring at nothing like it's just read a very unsettling prophecy. It begins when the messenger arrives, dusty and disinterested, riding a horse that looks half dead and fully over it. He rides straight through the centre of the village without a word, barely slowing down, just long enough to toss a sealed scroll at the feet of the reeve, who picks it up like it might explode. He reads it. His face tightens. His mouth thins. Then, without so much as a cough for ceremony, he turns and announces, "The King's Court will be convened in the village square, 1 hour." And just like that, panic. People start cleaning, sweeping, trimming what little there is to trim. Someone actually starts brushing the moss off the chapel walls, which has never happened before and may never happen again. The bailiff shows up next, puffed up with self-importance and orders. He shouts for everyone to gather and look presentable, which is hilarious considering no one here owns more than one tunic, and most of them have seen better centuries. An hour later, the court arrives. It's not a glittering parade of nobles on white horses. No, it's 3 men, a travelling judge, a local knight, and a scribe who looks allergic to joy. They're followed by 2 soldiers who are there for order, which mostly means standing very still and making sure no one runs away when things get dicey. They set up near the stocks, you know, the ones you just recently became intimately acquainted with. The judge unrolls a parchment longer than your arm and begins reading out names. Not for greetings, for accusations. Apparently there's been a conflict. Someone insulted someone's land claim, someone else retaliated by setting a fence on fire. There's mention of a stolen pig, a suspected affair, an unpaid debt, a prayer said too loud during a holy day. One name appears 3 times. You make a mental note to avoid that person forever. Then the judge calls your name, your stomach drops so fast it nearly tunnels out your feet. You step forward, trying not to look as terrified as you feel. The charge? Disruption of local order. You blink. That could mean literally anything. The judge frowns and asks if you were recently punished for theft. You nod slowly. He makes a note. Then he looks up and says something that should not be possible. You're being summoned to testify. Testify? You? In court? The next name called is the baker's wife. Oh, this is about the bread. You're both instructed to step forward and explain yourselves. She goes first, of course, and she gives the performance of her life, hands wringing, voice quivering, claiming she feared for her safety, that theft leads to lawlessness, that if poor folk go unpunished for stealing crusts, soon the entire village will be in flames. It's dramatic, almost impressive. Then it's your turn. You tell the truth. Simply, you saw bread left out, you were hungry, you thought it was discarded. You didn't mean harm, you were punished, you served your time. The judge squints at you like he's trying to determine whether your soul is worth the effort. He asks what you do for work. You say field labour, like half the village. He nods. Then he says something unexpected. You've paid your penalty. The case is closed. The baker's wife makes a noise like she's just swallowed a wasp. The judge moves on, and just like that, you've seen justice up close. It's not inspiring. It's arbitrary, slow, and mostly designed to remind everyone who's in charge. The judge never asked if you were hungry. He didn't ask why bread might be left out where anyone could grab it. He just checked a box and moved on. But still, you weren't punished twice. That's something, rare, but something. The next case is worse. A young man, barely 16, is accused of consorting with a married woman. The woman's husband is a minor landholder, which in this world means he has the legal power of a god and the emotional stability of a goat in a thunderstorm. The boy pleads ignorance, says he only delivered firewood. The woman doesn't speak. She's not allowed. The judge frowns. A public penance, he declares. 3 lashes and 1 day in the stocks. The boy flinches. The husband looks smug. No one cheers, no one cries. The village just watches, absorbs it, moves on. Because this isn't about truth. It's about order. The king's justice isn't blind, it's just selective. There's an open scholarly debate in the centuries to come. Was medieval justice inherently cruel or simply reflective of its time? Some argue it was pragmatic, a tool for survival in a chaotic world. Others say it reinforced a hierarchy that crushed the poor under the weight of expectation and religion. You, freshly dismissed from your accidental court debut, are inclined toward the latter. The day drags on, more names, more verdicts, more punishments meted out with the cold efficiency of someone clearing a ledger. By the time the court packs up, everyone's exhausted, not physically, spiritually, emotionally. It's draining to watch your friends and neighbours paraded through a system that views them as problems to be filed, not people to be heard. That evening you sit by the fire and replay everything. The judge's flat tone, the knight's smug silence, the scribe's furious note-taking. The way the boy looked, blood on his shirt and dirt on his face, blinking against the sun with a cracked lip and a pride he couldn't quite hide. You wonder if he'll be like you, marked now, watched more closely, punished more quickly. You hope not, but you know better. You've seen the king's justice, and once it sees you, it rarely forgets. It starts with a rash. That's how these things always begin, not with a scream or a fever, but with something small, itches, red spots, a little swelling in the wrong place. You notice it on your arm while chopping firewood one afternoon. Just a cluster of bumps are near the elbow, like you brushed against poison nettle or angered a local insect god. You ignore it naturally, because in this century a rash is as common as mud and about as respected. But by nightfall it's spread to your chest. The next morning you wake up drenched in sweat. Your sheets, if you can call them that, are soaked through, and your head is spinning like you spent the night inhaling chimney smoke, which you did. But this is something else. Your joints ache, your teeth hurt, your skin feels like it's trying to detach itself from your body. You know this feeling, you've seen it before, in others. This is not a winter cold, not a sleep it off and chew some herbs situation. This is the pox. Now, there are many kinds of pox in medieval England. The word itself is like a catch-all bucket for anything that makes your skin bubble and your insides rebel. It might be smallpox. It might be the great pox, which is syphilis in its early cheerful stage. It might be something worse, something that doesn't even have a name yet. All you know is that you're hot, cold, itchy, nauseous, and very possibly dying. You drag yourself to Elswith, the village's one-woman apothecary, priest, and rumour mill. She takes one look at your blotchy skin and hisses like you've brought a sake into her home. She doesn't touch you, just gestures for you to sit near the window and starts boiling something that smells like garlic and old socks. "You've got something," she mutters, poking at a pot with the kind of focus usually reserved for cursed relics. "Could be pox, could be the sweat, could be a punishment. What did you do lately?" "I ate bread that wasn't mine," you mumble, which is true. She nods. "Could be that. Could also just be bad luck." She gives you a mixture of herbs in water so bitter it makes your eyes water. You gag it down. Then she wraps your forehead in a cloth soaked in something cool and tells you not to talk, not to scratch, and not to breathe too deeply around her good candles. The next few days are a fever blur. You drift in and out, sweating through layers of blankets, muttering nonsense, and at one point yelling something about a chicken wearing a crown. You don't remember most of it. What you do remember is the way the village reacts. No one visits, no one brings food, and a small bundle of straw is left outside your door each morning with a cup of thin broth. And once you think someone throws a prayer stone through your window. Though it might have just been a child with bad aim, either way, you're alone. And the worst part, you're still contagious. That's what Elswith says, anyway, when she visits at arm's length wearing a mask made from herbs stuffed into a cloth sack tied over her face. It makes her look like a bird, an angry, overly judgmental bird. "You're lucky," she says on the fourth day. "No boils, no open sores. If this was the real pox, your face would look like stew meat by now." You groan in response. "Could be the French kind," she adds thoughtfully. You groan louder. Now, if this is syphilis, known in polite circles as the French disease, in French circles as the Neapolitan disease, and in Naples as someone else's problem, you're in for a ride. The kind with blisters, hair loss, bone pain, and potential madness at the end of it all. But you don't think you've done anything to catch it the usual way. Then again, this is medieval England. A handshake could be a death sentence. There's a curious medieval belief that illness is punishment. Divine, of course, you must have sinned, or failed to tithe, or looked at someone's daughter the wrong way. Maybe you didn't fast hard enough during Lent. Maybe God just doesn't like your face. So the villagers avoid you, not just out of fear, but out of judgment. You're sick, therefore you did something to deserve it. You lie on your straw mat, staring at the ceiling, trying to remember which mistake might have summoned this divine plague. Was it the bread? The solstice gathering? That time you laughed at the priest's cough? Meanwhile, your skin itches, your eyes water, your joints throb like they've been filled with boiling vinegar. But you survive, barely. By the 7th day, the fever breaks. You wake up drenched but coherent. The rash has faded, leaving behind a strange mottled pattern on your arms that makes you look like someone tried to bake you. You're weak, thin, and smell like an herb garden that was set on fire, but you're breathing. And that's saying something. When you step outside for the first time, blinking into the grey daylight, a few villagers look your way and mutter. One crosses himself. Another quickly herds their children inside. You're not sick anymore, but you're marked. A pox survivor, which, in this place, is only one step above a ghost. There's a fringe theory, whispered among a few of the older villagers, that surviving pox means you're now blessed. Touched by death, but spared. You're closer to the divine, or maybe closer to something else. A few people start asking if you have visions. You don't, unless fever dreams about cows playing chess count. Back at your cottage, Elswith leaves you a small jar of balm. No note, just a symbol scratched into the wax seal. Protection, or possibly, don't come back too soon, you rest for another week. Eating weak porridge and trying not to think too hard about the future, because now you know how quickly everything can change. One itch, one cough, one unlucky handshake, and your world folds in on itself. You start carrying a small charm in your pocket, not because you believe in magic, but because sometimes belief is the only shield you have. That, and you're not taking any chances with invisible curses. And now, when someone coughs in the village square, you move fast, because you've seen what happens next. You've felt it, and you're not ready to go back into that fire again. You survived the pox, but you're never forgetting it. Love isn't supposed to feel like this, a mix of terror and nausea, like you've eaten something forbidden, and now you're waiting for it to either digest or destroy you. But here you are, standing in the middle of a muddy cart path, heart pounding against your ribs like it's trying to flee the scene, and you're pretty sure you've just made the worst decision of your entire medieval life, because you've fallen for someone you're absolutely not supposed to fall for. Not a peasant like you, not a baker's daughter or a cowherd's son, or someone you could at least trade a carrot with. No, of course not. You had to fall for a noble's child. You didn't plan it. No one does. It started simple. Just eyes across a crowded chapel during Mass, when you were supposed to be thinking about sin and salvation, not cheekbones and jawlines. Then it was a glance by the well, a shared laugh after a goat ran off with someone's bonnet. You weren't even sure she, or he, or they, depending on the version of this story your heart prefers, noticed you. Until one day they did. It began with a scrap of cloth, dropped, maybe on purpose, maybe not, and left by the manor's garden wall. You found it. You returned it. Their hand brushed yours, and for one glorious second, it felt like the world had stopped being horrible. That's how it begins. And now you're in it. You've had 3 secret meetings, brief, awkward, perfect. You've spoken about nothing and everything. They said they have never met someone who actually listens. You said you have never met someone who didn't treat you like furniture with fleas. It's ridiculous. It's dangerous. And it's the only thing keeping you from giving up on this century entirely. The problem is, this kind of love isn't allowed. The social line between you and them isn't a thread. It's a wall, a law, a divine decree backed by church, crown, terms, and centuries of violent enforcement. Nobles don't marry commoners. They don't sneak out to meet them under old oak trees, and certainly don't promise things with voices so soft it makes your chest ache. If anyone finds out, you're dead. Or worse, humiliated, punished, disappeared quietly. They'll say you seduced someone above your station. They'll say you bewitched them, that you were seeking to elevate yourself through scandal and sin. If it's discovered, there's only one ending, and it doesn't involve shared cottages and happy children. It ends with you on your knees, not in front of a priest, but a blade. And yet, you keep going. You meet again under the cover of darkness behind the grain store. Their cloak is too fine for the cold, your fingers are cracked from labour, but none of it matters when you're close. They bring you bread, Real bread, still warm and sprinkled with herbs. You nearly cry. You tell them stories of your family. They tell you what it's like to dine by candlelight in rooms so big they echo. You laugh. They laugh. And then they lean in. The kiss is clumsy, soft, shocking. Your whole body lights up with warmth and panic. For a second you forget the world. Then the church bell rings in the distance and you both pull back like the sky might fall. Afterward, everything gets harder. You can't stop thinking about them, which means you stop sleeping properly. You start smiling at nothing, which earns you suspicion. The village is not a romantic place. Love is for songs, not real life. Marriages are arranged like cattle trades. You're supposed to care about dowries, not dimples. You tell Elswith. Just enough. Her eyes narrow, and she shakes her head. Nothing good comes from mixing blood across lines, she says. You'll end up bones in a ditch. You want to disagree, but you don't, because you've seen it before. You've heard the stories about the servant girl who got too close to a squire and vanished, about the field boy who flirted with a lady and was later discovered stealing from the manor, his hands nailed to the stocks for a day and a half. Everyone knows the rules. Everyone knows they're rigged. There's a scholarly debate about how much actual cross-class romance happened in medieval England. Some say it was rare, almost impossible, policed by bloodline and brutality. Others argue it happened more than we think, quietly, secretly, behind hedgerows and under moonlight. Either way, the results were rarely happy. The story of a peasant and a noble doesn't end with feasts. It ends with fines, with shame, or worse. And yet you meet again, one last time. You both know it can't continue. Their father is suspicious. Their mother has already started discussing betrothals with a neighbouring knight's family. They're being watched. The stakes are rising. But they had to see you one more time. Just once. Just to say goodbye properly. They press a token into your hand. Something small, valuable, stolen. A silver ring with their house's crest etched into the inside. Keep it, they whisper. So you remember. You want to give them something in return, but what can you offer? You have no riches, no fine cloth, no books or letters. So you give them your name, spoken slowly like a prayer. They smile and then they're gone. And just like that, it's over. You spend the next week in a daze. You go through the motions, working, eating, sleeping, but you're not really there. Your hands move, your heart doesn't. You keep the ring tucked in your boot. You never wear it, but you check it daily just to make sure it's still real. You think about them every time you pass the manor, every time you hear a horse in the distance, every time the wind shifts and you catch the scent of rosemary in the air. You never see them again. You don't know if they married, if they forgot, if they ever held someone else's hand and thought of yours. But you remember, because for a brief, brilliant moment in the middle of mud, blood and cold porridge, you were something other than a serf. You were seen, you were wanted, you were loved. And maybe that's worth the risk. Maybe that's worth everything. Rain again. Of course it's raining. You've lived enough years in this damp, glorious, moss-riddled land to know that if the sun shines too long, the sky begins to itch with guilt and immediately throws down another week of drizzle to restore balance. But this time it's not just annoying, it's dangerous. Because this is the kind of rain that doesn't stop. The kind that turns dirt into soup, fields into lakes, and roofs into soggy lies. This is flood rain. And it's not just a storm, it's a test. You wake up to the sound of dripping. At first you think it's your imagination. Then you feel the cold splash on your forehead. You open your eyes and see a new leak, third one this month, dribbling from the thatch above your bed and into your nose like a cruel prank from the weather gods. You drag yourself up and feel it immediately. The floor is damp. Your toes squelch. The thatch has failed. The walls are weeping. You're basically living inside a wet loaf of bread. Outside, things are worse. The path through the village is gone, replaced by a squelching stream of mud, straw and mystery goo. The pig pen has become a swimming hole. Chickens huddle together on the chapel steps, looking deeply unimpressed. And the stream, normally a friendly little trickle near the mill, has grown teeth. It's spilled its banks, swallowed the cart path, and is now hungrily eyeing the barley fields like it's deciding whether it wants to ruin your entire year. You slosh through the village, joining the gathering of equally soaked neighbours who've all arrived at the same conclusion. This isn't a bad day. This is the beginning of something worse. The reeve is shouting something about drainage ditches and sandbags, and as if either of those things exist in quantities big enough to matter. A few villagers begin digging trenches with whatever they can find, shovels, boards, a soup spoon. Here you're handed a bucket and pointed toward the lower field. That's where the flooding is worst. You get there and it's like staring into a grave you haven't died in yet. The field is submerged. The barley, your winter hope, is underwater. You wade in knee-deep, teeth chattering, trying to scoop water from a field into a ditch like that's a real plan. It's not, but doing something feels better than watching everything drown. And this is the real danger of a medieval flood. Not the drowning, though yes, people do drown, but the starvation that follows. Because if your crops die now, you'll feel it 6 months from now when your pantry is empty and your bones start arguing with your flesh about who gets to stick around. As the day drags on, the water keeps rising. You help pull 2 goats out of the rising muck. One man nearly loses a boot. He keeps yelling about it for an hour like it was his child. You slip twice and cut your palm on a broken fence post, now doing a perfect impression of a spear. Blood joins the mud. You wrap it in wool. It'll probably fester. At dusk, the priest wades out and declares that God is testing our devotion. Someone throws a turnip at him. It misses. Barely. That night, you sleep on a bench in the chapel along with half the village. Babies cry, dogs bark, no one really sleeps. The air smells like wet wool, fear and hope trying not to give up. You hold your injured hand to your chest and try to will the pain into the floor. By morning, the water has not receded. In fact, it's climbed a few inches, like it's trying to join you for breakfast. You're sent back out into the flood, this time to help the miller, whose wheelhouse is collapsing. You slog through thigh-deep water, lifting wet sacks of spoiled grain, your muscles screaming with every soaked motion. The grain smells like vinegar and death. It's lost. The miller weeps, not loudly, just this quiet shaking that makes you feel like someone cracked open the sky and let grief pour out. 3 days. That's how long the flood lasts. When it finally pulls back, the village is a wreck. Fields flattened, livestock missing, granaries mouldy, tools rusted, everything that could rot has. You find a boot in your field. It's not yours. No one claims it. The reeve calls a meeting and announces they'll petition the local lord for grain relief. Everyone nods, but no one believes it'll help. Nobles don't grow grain to share. They grow it to sell. And besides, the lord is weeks away, sipping wine in some stone fortress that doesn't leak when it rains. The famine comes quietly. At first, you just tighten your belt. Then you skip a meal here or there. You start to see it in others, too. Sunken cheeks, longer pauses between steps, the way everyone starts counting beans like they're coins. Elswith starts mixing bark into her bread. She says it's for digestion. You pretend to believe her. The debates start. Who gets food? Who doesn't? Some argue the elderly should eat less. Others say the children should eat more. One man suggests boiling leather, just to try. He's not joking. You remember the ring in your boot, the noble's gift. You consider selling it. But to who? No one has silver. Everyone just has mud and prayers. There's a fringe historical theory that peasant resilience was actually greater in times of disaster because communities pulled together. Maybe. But you've also seen what desperation does. It turns neighbours into threats. It sharpens the difference between mine and yours. A child disappears one night. Some say he ran away. Others whisper that someone took him for food. No one says it out loud. You don't sleep that night, or the next. And yet, somehow, you endure. Not because you're stronger than anyone else, not because God favours you, but because you're stubborn, because you refuse to let this place kill you the way it killed your crops, because even in the muck, even with hunger gnawing at your ribs like a rat with a grudge, you still get up, still work, still wait for spring, and when spring does come, when the first green shoots rise again, you weep, openly, unashamed, because nothing in this world is guaranteed, not bread, not love, not sunlight, but you're still here. And that's enough. For now, the year the fair returns to your village is the first time in months that anyone smiles without guilt. Real smiles. Toothy, muddy, wind-chapped grins that stretch all the way up into tired eyes. It's like someone flipped a switch, and the whole place of fields, fences, faces. He remembers it's allowed to be happy again, just for a day or two. Fairs in medieval England are a kind of controlled chaos. They're not just entertainment, they're permission. Permission to trade, to celebrate, to travel without immediate suspicion, to drink a little too much, and to spend the afternoon forgetting you owe the reeve 6 hens and 3 days' worth of firewood. Lords grant these fairs to villages for a limited time, often tied to saints' days or harvest milestones. For those few glorious days, taxes are paused, curfews ignored, and rules relaxed. It starts with a banner, red and gold, hung crooked across the square. Then the carts arrive, vendors from neighbouring towns and pilgrims on their way to nowhere in particular. They roll in with wooden wheels and worn-out mules, bringing with them cloth from the coast, beads from a foreign land, and pastries that smell like cinnamon and reckless spending. You wake to the sound of music. Not bells, not birds, music, real honest instruments. Pipes, drums, the occasional twang of something that might be a lute, or might just be a bowstring gone rogue. You throw on your least awful tunic, splash your face with well water, and join the others pouring into the centre of the village like moths to a bonfire. It's beautiful, not in the clean polished sense, but in the overwhelming way that reminds you life isn't always a miserable trek between chores. There are jugglers, dancers, a man eating fire, a dog wearing a hat. Children chase each other around barrels of mead, while adults pretend not to notice they're knocking over carefully stacked cabbages. And the smells, gods the smells. Roasted meat, fresh bread, spice cider. Someone is frying eels. It shouldn't smell good, but it does. You buy a skewer of something unidentifiable but delicious. For once you eat without rationing. You're not even sure you chewed. Money flows. Not a lot, but enough. You barter a carved whistle for a needle. Trade a spare egg for a pinch of pepper that makes you sneeze for a solid minute. You haggle over the price of a wool hood and lose, but the merchant throws in a handful of sweet dates as consolation. You spot familiar faces transformed by joy. The miller's wife, who hasn't smiled since the flood, is dancing with a man who may or may not be her husband. The priest is pretending not to enjoy the cider. Elswith, the apothecary, is doing palm readings in the corner, warning people about vague dangers involving goats and untrustworthy dreams. Someone hands you a drink, you accept it. Someone hands you another. You accept that too. The fair continues into the evening. As the sun dips behind the hills, torches are lit, casting everything in golden flicker. A bonfire is built, not for warmth, but for celebration. People begin singing, loud, off-key, uninhibited. You join in. You don't know the words, but no one cares. You're part of something tonight, and that's enough. You find yourself dancing. Yes, dancing. You, the same person who limps after 10 hours in the field and grumbles about cold soup, are now spinning clumsily in a circle with 3 others, laughing so hard your ribs hurt. You haven't laughed like this since you can't even remember. Maybe ever. A woman grabs your hand, quick, strong. She's older than you, sharp-eyed and mischievous, with laugh lines that say she's survived worse things than heartbreak. She spins you under her arm, says something about your boots being cursed, and disappears into the crowd like a ghost. Later, you sit by the fire breathless, exhausted in a way that feels earned. A young man sings a slow song in a language you don't know. It's beautiful, sad maybe, or romantic. You don't ask, you just let it wash over you. There's a scholarly debate about whether medieval fairs were truly joyful or just distractions from suffering. Honestly, it's a pointless debate. Because joy is a distraction, and that doesn't make it any less real, or these moments, rare and brilliant, are what keep people alive when the rest of life feels like a never-ending punishment. You hear a rumour that a travelling monk is offering blessings in exchange for wine. Another says a noblewoman in disguise is buying local cloth under a fake name. Someone claims a bear will be arriving in the morning. No one knows if it's true. No one cares. For one night at least, you're not just a peasant. Not a tool for harvest, not a number on a tax roll, not a mouth to feed. You're you, a person, with a name, a laugh, a full belly, and a cider-induced sway to your step. You stumble home late, sticky with honey, soot, and possibly eel grease. Your boots are muddy, your pockets are empty, your heart is oddly full. You collapse onto your straw bed with a sigh, still humming a tune you barely remember. Tomorrow the work returns. The rain will probably come back. Someone will definitely owe someone else a chicken. But for now, you cease. You sleep, smiling, because in a world where you're usually just surviving, tonight you lived. It's quiet when they come. Not a trumpet, not a shout, just the sound of hooves, slow and deliberate, like someone hammering the road with velvet fists. You're tending to the fire pit, still groggy from fair week cider and a dance you should not have attempted with your bad knee, when you hear the clatter. Not the friendly jangle of carts and cowbells. This is iron on stone, controlled, heavy, military. You look up to see the banner first, dark red, with the emblem of a crowned dag surrounded by swords, not your lord's symbol, a higher crest, royal even. Then come the riders, 5 men in matching cloaks, their horses dust-covered and bored-looking, but the men anything but. One of them wears chainmail, and it catches the light like a warning. Another has scrolls tied to his saddle. You don't need anyone to explain what's happening. The king has issued a levy. It's time for war. Within an hour, the entire village is assembled by the green, herded there with the urgency and charm of sheep before a thunderstorm. The captain, no one tells you his name, but he has the kind of face that looks like it's been through one too many winters and hasn't forgiven any of them, reads from the scroll. All able-bodied men aged 15 to 40 are hereby summoned to serve under His Majesty's command. Arms will be provided, compensation promised. Any resistance shall be met with appropriate punishment. The villagers murmur, shifting uncomfortably. You can feel it ripple through the crowd, dread, confusion, that specific kind of anger that only comes from being told you have no choice. A man beside you spits. Compensation, he scoffs. Last time they paid us in nothing and graves. The captain continues. There will be muster points, training camps, marches, victories, honour, glory. You've heard all of it before. You survived a siege after all. You know what glory looks like. Muddy, loud, and full of dying teenagers. Names are saying, yours is called. You step forward. Of course you do. You always do, because not stepping forward gets you accused of treason, and treason gets you hanged. They give you a day. 24 hours to say goodbye to your home, your goat, if you have one, and your life as you've known it. You spend the evening packing what little you own, a dull knife, a patched cloak, and a scrap of cloth that once belonged to someone who once meant everything. There's a strange rhythm to war preparation. You'd think it would be chaos, but instead it's methodical. You sharpen tools you hope you won't need. You burn letters you never sent. You leave water out for the neighbour's dog. That night you sit by the fire and listen to the wind. Not because you're feeling poetic, but because it might be the last time you hear it. The wind here sounds like home. The one near the front lines always sounds like someone whispering a list of names you're not ready to learn. The next morning you're issued your gear, a tunic that doesn't fit, boots that pinch, a sword that's older than you are and dull enough to use as a butter knife. One of the officers hands it to you with a shrug. We don't fight with fancy, we fight with numbers. You march. For hours, then days. You pass through towns where the locals watch you with pity, curiosity or resentment. In some villages, people cheer. In others, they throw rotten apples. You can't blame them. Soldiers mean one thing, trouble. At night, the camp is alive with every sound imaginable. Laughter, prayers, the occasional scuffle. You find a spot by a tree and try not to think too hard. There's a boy beside you, no more than 15, who asks if you've ever killed someone. You don't answer. He's nervous. He talks too much. Tells you about his mother, his sisters, a girl back home who smells like lavender and says she'll wait for him. You nod politely. You don't tell him that most of those stories don't end with weddings. Finally, you reach the field, not the battlefield, not yet, but a staging ground. Tents spread out like oddly shaped mushrooms, flags marking divisions, officers barking orders in voices that don't tolerate confusion. You're grouped with 10 others under a man named Hal, who seems half drunk, fully jaded, and bizarrely competent. Training begins, if you can call it that. Pointy end goes into the other man, Hal says during your first lesson, waving his sword like a soup ladle. And if you can't remember that, just scream and swing. You spend your days drilling, marching in formation, lifting shields, stabbing straw men who don't scream. Your arms ache, your legs shake. You eat hard bread and stew that tastes like it was boiled in regret. At night you dream of home, the fire, the fair, the person you kissed. You wake up with a hollow chest and cold feet. There's a scholarly debate over how effective these levied peasant armies actually were. Some say they were cannon fodder, used to swell ranks and slow the enemy. Others argue they were adaptable, resilient, the backbone of England's military for centuries. You're not part of the debate. You're just trying to survive. Then comes the march to the front. It's further than you expected. Through forests that seem to lean in too close, across rivers that chill your bones, past abandoned villages that have gone silent. You hear stories of a coming clash, of thousands of enemy soldiers, of fire raining from the sky. Probably exaggeration. Probably. But when you arrive, it's worse than you imagined. The battlefield is a mess of mud and bones. The air smells of ash and iron. You see carts loaded with limbs, piles of discarded armour, crows circling like they have already made reservations. You're told to wait, hold the line, prepare. No one tells you what day the battle will come, but you can feel it, like thunder in your spine. You clench your sword, you mutter a prayer you don't believe, you brace yourself for the worst. Because you've been conscripted, and in this world, that's just another way of saying you probably won't survive this. Dawn breaks like a wound across the horizon, red, raw, and already bleeding light across a field that doesn't want it. You've been awake all night, curled on damp grass, clutching your sword like it's going to whisper the secret to survival if you hold it just right. It doesn't. It just sits there, cold and indifferent, a lump of metal made for hurting strangers. When the call comes, it's not a trumpet or a glorious banner waving in slow motion. It's just a grunt from Hal, your half-drunk, fully competent commander, who kicks you in the ribs and mutters, "Up! Time to earn your ration." Your heart thudding like it's trying to escape through your throat. You're not alone. All around you, men stumble to their feet, bleary-eyed and pale. The young boy who talked about lavender-scented love is vomiting into a bush. No one comforts him. There's no time for comfort here, only movement. They hand out rations, stale bread, some salted meat you try not to examine too closely, and a weak beer meant to settle nerves. It doesn't. Your hands shake. You can't tell if it's fear or cold, probably both. Then comes the lineup. Hal walks the row, checking weapons, adjusting grips, slapping the occasional shoulder. Keep your shield up, don't run, don't think. Thinking gets you killed. Someone tries to argue that thinking might prevent death. Hal shuts him up with a stare that could crack stone. You're positioned on the left flank, lucky, supposedly, less likely to see the brunt of the assault. But then again, luck in war is like honour in tax collection, mostly theoretical and rarely in your favour. Across the field the enemy forms. You don't recognise their banners, their faces or their voices. They could be French, Scots, rebels, or some faction caught in the tangled chess game of noble disputes. You're not even sure what this war is about. Land, borders, honour, someone's pride. All you know is that you've been handed a sword and told to kill whoever walks toward you. The field is wide, churned with old mud and old blood. You can see bits of armour sticking out of the earth like forgotten roots. This isn't its first battle. It won't be its last. The order to march comes without fanfare. You move forward, every step is a negotiation with terror. The squelch of mud, the clank of gear, the ragged breath of the man beside you who smells like fear and onions. Your feet feel too heavy, your heart too fast. You try to keep your eyes forward, but they keep darting sideways, looking for escape, looking for anything that feels human. Then it begins. Arrows, not a wave, a rain. You barely hear the order to raise shields before the sky darkens. They come down like angry insects, whistling and thudding into wood, flesh and cere. One lands near your foot, quivering like it's still deciding who to kill. The boy with the lavender girl takes one in the leg. He screams, tries to crawl. Hal doesn't stop. "Leave him!" he barks. "Keep moving!" You do. Because stopping is worse. Stopping is death. Then the clash. It doesn't feel real at first, just noise and flashes. Then a man is charging at you, bearded, red-eyed, roaring like he wants to be remembered. You raise your shield just in time. The impact nearly knocks you down. You swing wildly, your blade connects. You don't know where. He grunts, falls. You don't have time to think about what you've done. Another comes, then another. You block, you swing, you feel something warm splash across your face and hope it isn't yours. The chaos is complete. Dosa screams, steel, mud, blood, everything blurs. You lose sight of your unit. You see Hal in the distance, covered in something red, still shouting, still swinging. Then a horn, and you don't know whose it is. Maybe yours, maybe theirs. But suddenly people are pulling back, retreating, some running, others dragging wounded. You follow, barely able to breathe, legs numb, vision narrowing. You stumble over a body, someone you know. You don't stop. You reach the rear, collapse beside a tree. You're alive, somehow. Your hands are trembling, stained. Your mouth tastes like iron and bile. You look around. The field is still full of sound. Crying, groaning, distant calls. There are fewer of you than there were this morning. The boy? Gone. Hal? Still standing. Barely. You sit in the dirt, sword across your lap, and feel nothing. Not relief, not pride, just emptiness. A healer makes the rounds. Gritty cloth, bitter herbs, a flask of something that burns all the way down. You take a sip. You want to scream, you don't. Later, someone says the battle was a success, that your side held the line, that reinforcements are coming, that the king will be pleased. You want to laugh or punch someone, because what you saw wasn't success. It was slaughter, held together by a thread of luck and screaming. There's an open debate among scholars about how well peasant levies performed in medieval battles. Some say they were brave, held lines, earned honours. Others claim they were expendable, meat for the grinder, fodder for knights to step over. You no longer care who's right. You're alive. You clean your blade, you stare at your hands. They don't feel like yours anymore. You sleep in shifts that night, curled under a rough blanket, surrounded by strangers who have seen what you've seen. You dream of arrows, mud, and that boy's scream. When morning comes, the sun rises like nothing happened. The officers talk about the next march. You get up, because that's what you do now. You march, you fight, you try not to die. And maybe, if the gods are kind and the arrows miss, you'll make it home. But nothing is promised here. Not even tomorrow. You don't come home a hero. There are no fanfares, no garlands hung from rooftops, no pretty faces waiting by the village gate. You arrive covered in dust, wearing boots that belong to a dead man, with half a sword, a stitched-up gash on your shoulder, and the kind of stare that makes even the priest keep his questions to himself. You've survived war, barely, and now you're back, but it feels more like haunting than returning. Everything looks smaller. The fields, the cottages, the people too. Bent a little more, a little thinner, a little quieter than you remember. Or maybe it's you. Maybe you've stretched in strange directions, pulled by pain, shaped by marching, hardened by the memory of the boy with the lavender girl, now a nameless body buried in some foreign mud. Maybe home hasn't changed at all. You're welcomed in that peculiar medieval way, with nods, cautious glances, and silence that says, "We're glad you're alive, but we don't know what's left of you." No feast, no relief, just a place by the hearth, a bowl of weak broth, and the ghost of who you were before the levy. Work resumes the next day, because of course it does. Crops still need planting, fences need mending. The goat has gone half feral and eats your sleeve before you've finished breakfast. You dig your hands into the earth and try to remember how this felt before blood and smoke filled your nose. The soil is the same, your hands are not. Someone finally asks what it was like. War. You lie, gently. Wet, you say. Loud smelled bad. They nod like they understand. Maybe they do. The reeve asks about casualties. You shrug. Numbers feel obscene now. You remember faces, not figures. You tell him the crown says it was a victory. He seems more interested in whether the Lord will increase taxes now that he's lost half his men. The days pass, slowly at first, then with alarming speed. Time folds in on itself when you're not waiting to die. You repair your roof, thatch by thatch. You help the blacksmith reinforce a wagon wheel. You drink with the old friends and don't talk about what's lurking behind your eyes. Sometimes at night, you dream of marching again, your feet moving without will, the creak of armour, the taste of fear. Other nights, you dream of the fair, the bonfire, the woman with laugh lines and strong hands, the music that felt like permission to be human. You don't know which dream is worse, and then the winter comes, colder than the last one. The wind cuts sharper. The snow arrives early, blanketing the fields before the last harvest is in. You help carry sacks of barley through the storm. You dig graves for 2 children who didn't make it through the first frost. You share your food, even though you're not sure how long it will last. This is what survival looks like. Not banners and medals, not glory, just persistence. Getting up every morning, mending things, making do, hoping the next sickness passes you by. There's a new face in the village, a travelling friar. He's young, too clean, speaks in phrases that smell of monastery parchment. He gives a sermon on redemption and the cleansing fire of war. You walk out halfway through. Later he tries to speak with you. "You've seen the battlefield," he says. "Tell me what it teaches." You look him dead in the eye and say that no one wins, some just come home. That shuts him up. As the cold deepens, something strange begins to happen. People start turning to you, quietly, cautiously, like you've become a part of the village's structure. Solid, dependable. A boy asks you how to hold a blade. A girl begs you to teach her brother not to be afraid of thunder. Elswith sends you to gather herbs in the snow because she says you walk like someone the spirits won't bother. You don't know what you've become, not a leader, not a saint, just here, present, awake, and in a place where death is common and kindness is rare. That's enough to make people notice. There's a debate later in history about whether peasant soldiers who survived were changed fundamentally, or simply forced to pretend nothing happened. You think both are true. You've changed. But you've also learned the art of pretending that you're whole, that the dreams don't wake you, that your heart doesn't lurch every time someone raises their voice behind you. And yet, there's peace in the routine. You grow to like the smell of the earth again, the rhythm of hoeing and sowing, the sound of chickens arguing in the yard. You catch yourself humming sometimes. You light candles during the solstice, not to ward off evil, but to welcome warmth. It's not joy, but it's something took close. One morning, while mending the fence near the woods, you find the old sunwheel charm tucked under a rock. The same kind Wenna tossed into the fire that solstice long ago. You don't know who placed it there. Maybe her. Maybe someone else who remembered. You hold it in your hands, feel its carved grooves, its symmetry. You take it home, hang it above your door, not because you believe it will save you, but because it reminds you that once, even in the coldest dark, people gathered to welcome the return of light. You're still afraid. Of war. Of illness. Of the church, the crown, the creeping decay of age. But you're not paralysed by it. You've seen the worst, and you're still here. You don't need to be fearless, just functional. And sometimes, on clear nights, you sit outside with a blanket over your knees, sipping weak cider, watching the stars emerge one by one. You don't know their names, but you know they were there during the battle, during the fair, during every terrible, beautiful moment. They've watched it all. So have you. And now, finally, after everything, you rest your head on your folded arms, close your eyes, and sleep. Not with one eye open, but deeply. Because this time, you've earned it. So here you are. Blanket over your shoulders, fire crackling low, the world outside your cottage slow and quiet. You've survived. Maybe not unscarred, maybe not unchanged, but undeniably still here. And that, in this medieval world, is something close to a miracle. You weren't the strongest, you weren't the wealthiest, you didn't have saints whispering in your ear or gold stitched into your tunic, but you learned. You endured plagues and prayers, famine and festivals, frostbite and heartbreak. You stood in fields knee-deep in mud and grief. You fought wars that weren't yours to begin with. You danced around bonfires when no one was watching. You fell in love, secretly, dangerously, and let it shape your soul in ways you never expected. You faced the system and survived it, not because it made sense, but because you made do, because you got up every day, shoulder to the wheel, heart in your throat, hands in the soil. You were told you were born to serve. You were reminded constantly that your body was worth less than a horse, your voice less than a priest's whisper. But still, you carried yourself through the muck with a quiet defiance that no one could entirely crush. Maybe you weren't meant to be remembered. Your name won't echo through scrolls or be carved in chapel stone. But here in this story, you exist, you breathe, you matter. And now, as the candle burns low and the shadows grow long across the wooden beams of your roof, you can finally let it all go. The war, the hunger, the fear, the wondering if you ever truly belonged in this place or any place. You've done what so few managed to do, not just in your time, but in any time. You survived, and now it's okay to sleep. The village is quiet, the wolves are distant, the stars are rising, and so are you, just a little, in someone's memory.